Hello, welcome to Jason the Millennial. I'm Jason, speaking to you here in the very snowy state of Kansas. And I got my friend Jacob from Jacob Martin.
Yep.
Uh,
I'm sitting here in the falling out state of Tennessee.
oh man, it snowed over at your place, right?
It did, but
Yeah,
it's melting,
well, that's good.
falling out.
Yeah, it's about 19 degrees at the moment here in Kansas, and it's getting at nighttime. It's starting to get into negative temperatures, so it's
Oh,
bad. um, but yeah, so we're here. We're talking about our 1990s Music Hall of Fame. Uh, I already did one. This is the second part. The first part was Briar and Adam did their 10 artists. And now we're going to do our 10 artists, Jacob and me. And so overall, covering 40 artists from the 90s period, basically, that we think should be in the Hall of Fame, basically. Our personal picks. And so just to recap, so there's certain people you're not going to hear because they've already been talked about, but we've already covered Oasis, Radiohead, Morrissey, Colin Hay, Steve Earle, Kiss, Bob Seger, Motley Crue, Cranberries, Elvis Costello. Those are all Adam's picks. Then Breyer picked Nirvana, Bjork, Green Day, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Meatloaf, Dream Theater, Megadeth, Tool, and Weezer. So we will not be talking about them because they were already talked about.
and
But we got some
I
pretty
know
good.
knowing you wouldn't have picked Radiohead.
Oh God, no, definitely would have. They probably deserve to be on there because they definitely had some popular albums. But I wouldn't want to talk about like someone else can talk about them.
You're like, they sold a lot of albums, and a lot of people really like them. Not me.
Not me. um, 90s is interesting because this is the one period of time I can actually talk about music that I remember when it came out. Like, because we've been talking about the 60s and 70s and 80s, and I wasn't around really to listen to that music when it came out, or I was too young. But it's kind of nice now talking about the 90s because these are bands and artists that I fell in love with in the 90s when they were coming out. So I kind of remember these albums and these songs on the radio because I used to listen to the radio and I would hear these songs on the radio and be like, oh my gosh, that's a good song. I need to, listen to the album and all that. So this is kind of fun for me to kind of go down memory lane as, when I was younger and get to talk about my favorite groups and stuff like that. I definitely bring in a lot of because I used to listen to. I kind of got into a little more of the alternative rock first, so I definitely got a lot of alternative rock in my list. I would say, and then some pop singers as well. I think Jacob's definitely going to bring in more country into our group.
Yeah,
So
I have. I got three country artists on my list, but I try to diversify it a little bit between different genres to try to make it fair. Because, yeah, to be honest, I'm very biased towards country music in the '90s. It's such a great decade of country music, and if this was just the Country Hall of Fame, I'd put all country artists on here.
yeah, oh yeah, plenty of. I used to listen to country in the '90s, so there's a lot of good artists in the '90s, from in my point of view, that could make a list for sure. Um, we got Scott here. If only I had waited to do this. Yeah,
I know, Scott. Your sound garden already got inducted. I think Adam or Briar
Briar,
took that one.
Briar already talked about Soundgarden. Yeah, so you have to check out that video.
Yeah,
uh, I think I made a play.
My Old Son's a good song. I like that one.
I know that one. Yeah, that
That's
yeah,
all song
yeah
I know
that's
from him.
that's the only song I remember from Soundgarden growing up was that was on the radio a lot. But yeah, hopefully you'll. I mean, Scott's been listening to a lot of '90s lately, so he knows a lot about the '90s. Um, Unfortunately, we don't have like Coldplay on here because Coldplay didn't really come about until 2000, I think.
I
Uh,
guess if we still have YouTube channels in about 5 years, maybe we can add artists from the 2000s, maybe.
uh, that'd be great. I think there's still some great artists that came out in 2000. So
Yeah, I know who
uh,
I would induct if we went that forward in time.
yeah, I mean, I could do it, but most people in our group don't go that far usually. But
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, Coldplay definitely be in the 2000s Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that. I'd definitely put them in. But yeah, so yeah, talking about the 90s here. Of course, you didn't grow up in the 90s, Jacob, so
Yeah, I was born in '95, so
so
I didn't really listen. I didn't really pay attention to music until maybe 2000 going forward.
yeah, yeah, so just a little before your time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love John Mayer as well. He's great.
yeah. John Mayer's all right.
Yeah, so yeah, so we're gonna go back and forth, and we're gonna talk about certain artists, a band in the 90s that we're gonna think we deserve to be in the Music Hall of Fame, basically. And yeah, 10 apiece here because we did our two bonus picks already, so
Yeah,
be easy.
well,
Just
yeah. I thought it was like bonus picks per decade. I was confused by that rule.
no, it was just two in total.
If
Just
I know that, I would have done 180s, 190s, but
yeah.
okay, it's all right.
I think we covered all the big 90s artists though in our 40 artists, I would say.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anybody major that we're missing out. I don't think, but we'll see.
I will say, if I had room for one more, I would have added Alan Jackson.
Yeah, there's a lot of country artists like Alan Jackson. I was thinking of what are their names? Brooks and Dunn.
Brooks and Dunn would have been a great pick too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably, or yeah, Tim McGraw probably also.
Tim McGraw, definitely. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Did we talk about Clint Black? We haven't talked about Clint Black or
no Clint Black. Yeah, I would have. Yeah, he would have been good. He would have been good too.
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah,
yeah. Weezer was talked about. Yep, Briar talked about Weezer.
I will say, Buddy Holly is an awesome song from Weezer. That song is
that's a good song.
Yeah.
All right, so you want to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. The first artist I'll be inducting, and I think when we were getting late into the '80s, there were a couple artists I was like, you know what, they're going to be missed out on the '80s. So I tried to pick on some of mine, artists that were still big in the '80s, but they still had some relevance even in the '90s, so that I can add them in as well. And the first in that category is a man by the name of George Michael. George Michael, an English singer, born in 1963. In the early 80s, he teamed up with a guy named Andrew Ridgeley, and they formed a duo called Wham. And Wham had some big hits in the early mid 80s. You probably heard songs like Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, Last Christmas. Those are the two I can think of off the top of my head. But around the time Wham was pretty big, George Michael had this big solo hit. It was put on a Wham album, but it was only credited to George Michael, and that was Careless Whisper. And that was like the big, huge song in George Michael's career in the early 80s with that iconic saxophone solo. It's a really epic song. It's Deadpool's favorite song, even. He even loves that song.
That's right.
But I think there were some tensions between the two guys to the point where George Michael decided to go solo. They disbanded in 1986. He had his first solo album, Faith, in 1987, which is still one of the best-selling albums of all time. 4 of the songs were number 1 hits. The title track, Father Figure, One More Try, and Monkey. And it was even awarded Album of the Year at the Grammys. He also had a number 1 duet with Aretha Franklin in 1986 called I Knew You Were Waiting. That's a really good song. And then going into the 90s, he had another big album called Listen Without Prejudice, Volume 1, which had another number 1 hit called Praying for Time, and another big song on there called Freedom. the first time I ever heard that song was in a credit card commercial of all places, and it was just the chorus going freedom, freedom,
Yeah.
freedom. Even though the song is very personal and it talks about the complicated relationship he had with the other guy from Wham and his struggles to stay relevant in the music industry. Very, very, I think it's one of the most introspective songs about being a musician. I think it's a fantastic song.
Mm.
And kind of the frustrations of that, like trying to do your own thing and the pressures of the label, or at that time, MTV was big too. They were trying to push a public image, particularly on George Michael, and he wanted to go past that. And that's what the song's all about. And he had other big hits throughout the 90s. He had another big selling album. It looks like one's called Older. And he had some other hits on there. I'm not familiar with some of these later 90s hits, but there's one called Jesus to a Child, Fast Love, Outside. He had some personal problems. After that, he got arrested for public lewdness, and there was some drug stuff that really messed him up. He had a battle of pneumonia and fell into a coma in 2011, but recovered. And as soon as he was starting to get his personal demons on track, he died of heart failure Christmas Day 2016. I had heard he was planning on like putting out new music, and that didn't happen. He was only 53 years old. But the hits from George Michael are iconic, especially from his first two albums. And if you include the Wham stuff along with it, you have still a really good career. I've always liked George Michael as a vocalist. There's also a really good duet version of Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, where it's him and Elton John, and that was a #1 hit for the two of them. I think it was like 92. That's a really good duet version of the song. So there's a lot of good music to listen to from George Michael. And I love his vocals as well. Listening to his music over the years, whether it's his solo stuff or with Wham. So I think with all that, I think that is worthy of a spot on the Music Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with his Faith album being so big.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So my first pick is a band I was very familiar with actually in the 90s, and that is the Smashing Pumpkins. They're an alternative rock band from Chicago that formed around 1988. The lead, kind of frontman of the group, who's lead singer and guitarist, is Billy Corgan. You've probably seen him. He's bald. He wasn't bald at first, but I think he went bald pretty young. More as his bald head. He's kind of a unique voice. That's pretty recognizable. But guitarist James Iha and Darcy Wetsky was the bass player for quite a while. He's not in the group anymore. And then Jimmy Chamberlain is the drummer anyway. So that's kind of the core group that kind of got famous in the 90s period. And their first big album, there was a second album called Siamese Dream, which came out in 1993. And that was a huge album for them. It really blew them up as one of the top alternative rock. They're very hard rock, very heavy guitar kind of band. Billy Corgan almost kind of screams sometimes when he sings. He has that kind of voice sometimes. But yeah, that album had three pretty big hits on it. Today, Cherubim Rock that's a great rock song. One of my favorite songs from them. And Disarm, which is actually more almost like a ballad type rock song or something. Very nice. Mayonnaise is also a pretty good rock song on the album. I quite enjoyed that album. It's a good rock album for the 90s period. Kind of comes from that, hard rock era of the 90s period. And anyway, so that was the first kind of big album for them. And then the next album was also pretty big for them, which is called Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness, which came out in 1995. This was their third album, and it was a double album. And I owned this album when I was like in junior high. again, I was listening to the radio, and the song that really got me into Smash Pumpkins was a song called 33, which is definitely one of the more softer songs. It's really more of an acoustic song, which is interesting because they don't do a lot of those. But very wonderful, just kind of a beautiful sounding song where it's not screaming or anything. And I like Billy Corgan's voice. He has a very unique voice. But I love that song 33. It was like, when I heard that song, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like one of the best songs I've ever heard. And I guess somehow I got this album. I got it on cassette back when I was still buying cassettes, because I had a Sony Walkman, and it was a double album, so I had two cassettes to it. And of course, back then you put the cassette in, and then you listen to it, and then you got to rewind it, and then you got to turn it over, and then you got to get the man. It was a whole deal back then, before digital and CDs and stuff like that. Even you just can't fast forward. You just can't skip songs. You have to listen to every song. But I listened to that album a lot. I loved that album when I was again in junior high. Though my parents didn't know I bought that album, because my parents would never let me buy that album, and they had no idea I was listening to the album. I had to hide it away, and I listened to it when they're not around, I guess, or I probably was in my room or something like that, and I would listen to it, and then I would put the album like in a drawer somewhere and try to hide it so my parents would never know that I was listening to it, because they do curse, and it's some loud hard rock music that my parents would not allow me, but it had a lot of hit songs on it, like Bullet with Butterfly Wings was a huge hit on the radio. 1979, maybe their biggest hit. I feel like that was extremely played on the radio, and that's a really good song. I really enjoyed that one. It has a real cool sound to it. And then Tonight also was a really cool song, and great use of orchestra. I love the use of orchestra with the kind of the rock sound. But I listen to the album every once in a while, and I don't like the hard rock stuff, but I like the more softer stuff that they do. I think it's actually really good on that album, for the most part. But that was their biggest album that they ever did. It was a #1 album. It was diamond certified and all that. Anyways, besides that was the biggest stuff they did. I think, was those two albums. I mean, they'd go on, they made more albums, and none of them were quite as big as those, I think. So I didn't really write any more notes other than those two albums. To me, are kind of the two to check out, I think, if you want to check out Smashing Pumpkins. Is Siamese Dreams and Melancholy Infinite Sadness has pretty much all their big hits on them anyway. But overall, yeah, Smashing Pumpkins to me was definitely one of the biggest rock bands of the 90s that everybody was talking about and buying the records and all that. So I definitely need to delve more into them. Past those two albums, that's the only thing I really know about them. But yeah, so yeah, Smashing Pumpkins is my first pick into our Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with Smashing Pumpkins. I know them by name, and I probably only heard like maybe one or two of their songs. Like I've heard 1979 before.
Okay,
it's a pretty good song, but I couldn't. I'm not that well versed on Smashing Pumpkins to say whether I think they're a great band or not.
Well, I might pick one of their albums for our album exchange one of these days.
That would be good. All right. My next one, continuing on in the trend of leftovers from the 80s.
Yeah.
Talking about Bryan Adams. That's who I'll be talking about next. He is from Canada. I didn't realize that until looking it up just now. But yeah, he was a big Canadian artist. It's good to know that I think he's at least one of two Canadians I'll be talking about.
I got two Canadians on my side too.
So he broke out in the 1980s. His first big album was called Cuts Like a Knife in 1983. The title track was a big hit for him, along with Straight from the Heart. Mm-hmm. Two really good songs there. His follow-up album, Reckless, it says that was the first album by a Canadian to be certified diamond in Canada, which is really cool. And that was the album that made him a global star. It features hit songs such as Run to You, which is a great rock song, the power ballad Heaven, which went to #1, along with probably his most recognizable song by many people, that being Summer of '69, which is a fantastic song. That's probably one of his best songs. And then when you move into the 90s, he had uh, a song that went to number one in 19 countries, including 16 straight weeks in the UK. One of the best-selling singles of all time, which was from the movie Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Everything I do it for you.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's in that movie, but it's a great power ballad, one of his biggest hits. Even as cheesy of a song that is, it's still a really, really good love song. I feel like Breyer in this case. I'm a sucker for ballads because Brian Adams can do ballads very well.
Oh.
And Everything I Do is definitely one of those songs. It's also on his 1991 studio album, Waking Up the Neighbors, which was another big album of his. It also has a great song, a more rocking song called Can't Stop This Thing We Started, which is another great hit of his. And he had other hits throughout the 90s, most notably. These are all ballads. Please Forgive Me, great song. He did the song, the collaborative song All for Love with Rod Stewart and Sting, which is on the soundtrack to the 90s Three Musketeers movie.
Yeah.
And he also had a big hit with in 95 with Have You Ever Really Loved a Woman, which is more of an acoustic ballad that's really good as well. Of course, my introduction to Brian Adams, I need to share this story. My introduction to Brian Adams was actually as a kid when Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron came out, the DreamWorks movie.
Yeah.
Brian Adams did the soundtrack for that movie.
Okay.
He had a pretty moderately successful song that came from that movie called Here I Am, which I've always had a soft spot for. And even rewatching the film all these years later, in my opinion, it's one of DreamWorks' most underrated films. It's actually in my top 10 from the studio. That soundtrack from Brian Adams, as cheesy as they are, me and Ryan Cam on our Discussing DreamWorks series, we were pretty split on the Brian Adams music. I loved them. He didn't care for them.
Okay.
But I thought the songs were really good. I think it complemented the story well, in my opinion. Kind of similar to Phil Collins and Tarzan. But that's a part of Brian Adams' career that gets overlooked is the Spirit soundtrack, and I wanted to highlight that for this Hall of Fame. But he, let's see, he's got at least 16 Grammy nominations, 5 Golden Globes.
Wow.
3 Academy Awards for his songwriting as well. So he's a pretty good career there. He's estimated to have sold between 75 to 100 million records worldwide, making him one of the best-selling music artists of all time. So that's good accomplishments from Brian Adams. I think he does tend to get a little overlooked. I think some people might just view him as, just the cheesy pop rock guy or the cheesy ballad guy. But he had a good winning streak, particularly in the 80s and 90s, and he had some great hit songs, and I don't think you should overlook them because they were big mainstream radio hits. So Brian Adams in the 90s Hall of Fame.
I agree. We don't really talk about him that much. He's not really talked about in our groups and the people that I listen to on vinyl in the vinyl community. But definitely the Robin Hood song, that was huge. I remember when that came out. That was a huge movie. I remember we all loved that movie as a kid. And yeah, that was a great love song. That's what I knew him by, really, was that song. That was like the main thing.
And even if I hear the song on the radio and my mom's in the car, like she'll sing along to it because that was such a big, big song.
Do it for you. Oh yeah, super good.
Mike.
Mike does 2 legends on a Tuesday night. What's going on, fellas?
Oh, I don't know if I'm a legend, but okay.
You're official legend. Yeah, it's funny. I just did a live stream just the other day with Mike and Norn. Now I got you, and then I got another one coming tonight. So I got a lot of live streams going on lately. But But yeah, for me, my next pick is going to be Alanis Morissette. She is a Canadian singer as well. Um, she was a kind of she started young. She sang these kind of more upbeat dance pop music of the early '90s. It was kind of her thing. And in Canada, she wasn't known in America at all. She was just kind of known in Canada as this kind of uh, yeah, young, like I said, early teenager. Like she started pretty young, doing pop music and stuff like that. It's funny if you ever see her doing in the early '90s, nothing like what she would become. Sounds like a party is over at Old. Yeah, everybody's invited. Um, yeah, and so her albums didn't do particularly that great. She wasn't like a huge famous, like I said, just maybe inside Canada a little bit, but then when she turned 19, which was still young, she came out with an album that was definitely changed her life, and that is Jagged Little Pill, which is this album cover here I got on vinyl. Um, and this came out in 1995, and this album was huge. And it was a total change of character for her. This is a very angsty rock album, like alternative rock album. So she really changed her sound. It's very edgy, kind of, for that time. Like she said the F word in one of her songs, and they're very, very hard rock at times. And yeah, her voice, just very unique voice though. I really love her voice. It really shines on this album. But yeah, it was the biggest selling album in 1995. Sold 33 million copies. It's one of the biggest selling albums of all time. It is incredible what that did. Also won Grammy Album of the Year for her that year, and I think she also won Song of the Year for "You Ought to Know." Was also very huge. But yeah, it had several hit songs on it that are on the radio. "You Ought to Know" was a really big one. That's definitely, you probably know that one. That was played. If you're in the '90s, that was on the radio a lot. And you ought to know. Oh my God, like incredible vocals. That's one where she says an F word in there, and on the radio they had to cut that out, of course. But you're like, holy cow! Like I wasn't used to hearing the F word in an album. I was like, holy cow! Like I didn't know you could curse it on an album. Like what the heck? But yeah, that was huge for her. "You Learn" was a hit song on the radio. "Hand in My Pocket" was quite a bit on the radio as well. "Ironic," maybe her biggest hit song from this time period. "Ironic" was really big on the radio, and their music video was big. Definitely a favorite of mine. And "Head Over Feet" is a really good song as well on that album that had a little airplay. But yeah, just from like "Ironic" and "You Ought to Know," two of the biggest songs of the night, and even to this day, those are probably her two biggest songs that she sings, every concert. Um, for me, this is actually the first album I heard in the '90s, because up to '95, I was only listening to the oldie station. I was just listening to '60s and '70s music, and '50s and '80s. I guess I should say, there was one station that was 103.7, that was '50s and '60s music, and then there was 104.5, and that was '70s, '80s music, and that's all I listened to. And then my older sister, and this is probably around '95 or whatever, '96. It must have been '95, yeah. She came home with this Jagged Little Pill CD that I think she borrowed from a friend. Introduced her to this album, and so my sister had this album, and I was like, I never heard of Alanis Morissette, never heard of Jagged Little Pill. I had no idea it was a big album. I just know my sister was listening to it, and I was like, and she was saying it was a good album, so I was like, I'll take a listen. So I listened to it, and man, it blew me away, because I never heard music like this before. This was way different than what I was listening to. And I kind of liked it. I liked the hard rock music. I love the angstiness of the singer. Yeah, and I had no idea it was a big album, but I heard it and I was like, this is a pretty good album. And then I started listening to '90s music at that point. After that, I'm like, I should listen to what's going on out today. And then I listened to 95.1, which was the alternative rock station where I lived. And yeah, that's when I got introduced to Oasis and a lot of other bands that I'm talking about. And in the 90s, Smashing Pumpkins, you know, all these 90s bands I had no idea about until I heard this album. So this album was like my gateway to 90s rock music. So it holds a kind of a special place in my heart because of that. Anyways, again, my parents probably would not let me listen to it because they had the curse words in it.
Oh,
And my parents
yeah.
had no idea I listened to this album.
If they're watching you today, they're probably like, "Wait,
yeah.
you listened to that back then?"
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There were some movies and some music that I listened to or watched that my parents would not let me, and I had to do it behind their back. So I'm sorry, but I was, you know, you're a teenager, you rebel a little bit.
That does seem to happen a lot. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so I mean, I put her in here mainly because this was really the album that puts her in my Music Hall of Fame, because this album, like I said, was so huge. One of the biggest albums of all time came out here. Besides that, there really isn't a lot more to say about her. She came out with another album after that called Supposed Former Infatuation Junkie in 1998, and they had a hit song on it called Thank You. Thank You was a good song. It was on the radio a lot too. Besides that, I don't know of any other songs that were big, you know, or any albums that were that big. So she was almost, you know, kind of a, I don't know what to call it, not a one-hit wonder, but just like one album really kind of defines her career. But it was so big that I still like to put her in here because it was, you know, such a big album for me. And overall, though, she won 7 Grammys, and she holds the record for most songs topping the alternative charts. So she does have a lot of accolades there in the 90s period. Anyway, so yeah, that's my second pick.
Yeah, I've heard the biggest songs from her, and they're all really good. You Ought to Know's classic. I like what's it? Hand in My Pocket is probably my other favorite song of hers. I like that one. I think her voice can be divisive in this day and age, because her music, because I like her music, like the local radio station where I'm at, or where I'm from in Virginia, where I grew up. We were hearing, it was called Q99, and they play music from like the 80s to today. So Alanis will pop up on there, and I think it was Hand in My Pocket, and Mom was like, "Ew, what is this? She sounds awful." and then one of my other friends, I was in the car driving recently. I was hearing my Spotify playlist, and it's got a bunch of random music on there. And Alanis popped up. I think it was the same song, Hand in My Pocket. And my friend, my former roommate, he was like, "This is awful. This woman can't sing."
It's definitely a unique voice, I think.
Yeah. I think it's I think it's like Bob Dylan. It's like, it's kind of like an acquired taste.
All right, what's your third pick, Jacob?
My third pick, this is like the last big one, I would say, of carryovers from the 80s. And this guy, more so, he was bigger in the 80s than he was in the 90s, but I still wanted to put him on here. That's John Mellencamp.
I thought that.
He had so many big hits throughout the 1980s. Hurt So Good, Jack and Diane, Crumbling Down, Pink Houses, Lonely Old Night, Small Town, ROCK in the USA, Cherry Bomb, just to name a few. All really great songs that kind of appeal to like your rural America, middle America, heartland. Kind of similar sound to like Bruce Springsteen almost. There's a pretty good appeal there. And he does have some great songs. I don't know what did he do in the 90s. I think the biggest song he had in the 90s was a song, he did a cover of Van Morrison's Wild Night. I've heard his cover of that. It's pretty good. It came from an album called Dance Naked, that's a title. I don't know what that's all about, but I've heard the cover of that song Wild Night. It's a pretty good song. I think he still performs even to this day. I know John Mellencamp is one of the founding member. He was one of the co-founders of Farm Aid, along with Willie Nelson, where they do these benefit concerts to support local family farms, and they've been doing that to this very day. I think a recent song I've heard from John Mellencamp, like technically the first John Mellencamp song I heard was in 2004, 2005. He had a song that kind of gained traction on both rock and country radio called Our Country. And it was used in a bunch of Chevy truck commercials, and that's how I heard the song. And I saw the video for it too, and I always thought it was a pretty good, like, American rock song that I really dug. And listening to it years later, I still think it's a pretty good song. So yeah, there's a lot of great hit songs from John Mellencamp, particularly in the '80s. There's some good guitar playing on his songs. Pretty good songwriting as well. John Mellencamp, 90s Hall of Fame.
Yeah, also known as Cougar Mellencamp, I think.
Yeah, I think his early albums he was called John Cougar. I think that was his middle name. But in recent years, he's gone by just John Mellencamp, his birth name. Because I wanted to be a serious musician. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm mostly familiar with like Jack and Diane and Hurt So Good. It's good stuff. Did he do Small Town?
He did Small Town, yeah.
I like that song. Yeah. I definitely need to listen to more of him. All right. Next band group I'm going to talk about is a group called Matchbox 20. And Matchbox 20, I don't know if many people know about Matchbox 20 out of the 90s because they're not talked about a whole lot. They're not a band that people, talk about when they talk about the great bands coming out in the 90s. But I was a big fan of Matchbox 20. They had a lot of hits on the radio. I owned their first two albums actually owned on CD when I was younger. I don't have any more, unfortunately. But the first two albums I thought were pretty good. Anyways, but yeah, they're an American rock band from Orlando, Florida. They formed in 1995. The lead, you probably know, Rob Thomas. He's the lead singer. He would go on and sing a song with Santana that was a huge hit later. Now I'm forgetting the name. I'm talking
Smooth. That's a great song.
Smooth. Yeah, Smooth. And that one album, Song of the Year, that was a huge song when that came out. And he'd go on and he actually did some solo albums as well. I haven't really listened to much of that. Again, I haven't listened to many past his first two albums, to be honest. I haven't delved too much into Matchbox 20 because those were the two big things when I was growing up. But yeah, Rob Thomas, lead vocalist, Brian Yell, bass guitar, Paul Doucette, drums, and Kyle Cook, lead guitar. But their first album came out in 1996 called Yourself or Someone Like You, which did very well, had a lot of big hits on it. It went 12 times platinum. But Real World was a big hit, Long Day. And then probably the biggest was 3 a.m. was a pretty big song for them. And Push. Push was also pretty big on the radio. And I got that album basically because 3 a.m. and Push were on the radio, and I just love those two songs. Like I said, they're not hard rock. They're just kind of part of that alternative rock, I guess, era, but they weren't hard rock at all. They're like pop rock, I guess. I don't know. Not real heavy on the guitars or anything. But I really like Rob Thomas's voice. He has a really good kind of rock vocal type of singing about him, I think. Very strong voice. Anyways, but yeah, Yourself, Someone Like You was, I thought, really good. And then their next album I liked even better. I had that album as well, and that was called that came out in 2000. And that went 4 times platinum. So not as big as their first, but still pretty good. It went number 3 in the charts. But that had 3 pretty big songs on the radio. If You're Gone was maybe the biggest one. That was on quite a bit. Then Bent, I really like that. That's a super catchy rock song. And then Mad Season's also a really good song off the album. Again, pretty good mixture of rock and maybe pop and ballad type stuff at that period anyways. But yeah, based on those 2 albums, I think they deserve to be in the 90s Hall of Fame. They did some more albums. I didn't write them down. I didn't go too far into their discography, but Still, they had many hits on the radio during that period, and their first two albums did really well. So for me, it's enough to put them here in the 90s Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Matchbox 20. There are some great songs that you mentioned. I think my favorite's probably 3 a.m. It's a really good song.
Yeah. Very catchy.
Yeah, it's a really good song. All right, my next artist, the first country artist that I'll be talking about, and that is Reba McEntire.
All right.
Of course, most people just call her as Reba because of the name. I don't know anybody else that goes by Reba, so she has the name all to herself. So she grew up in Oklahoma. She released her first album in, I think, late 1970s. Actually, she didn't really break out until the 1980s. She had a #1 on the country charts with "Can't Even Get the Blues." Her first real breakout album was in 1984. That album's called "My Kind of Country." She had a lot of hits throughout the 80s, including "Whoever's in New England," which won a Grammy that year. She had other big hits throughout the 19 albums. One of her biggest ones, I think, it says here, this is her highest selling album, the 1991 album "For My Broken Heart," which was created out of tragedy because 8 of her band members were killed in a plane crash in San Diego. And because of that bad tragedy, that inspired her to create this album, which had some of her biggest hits, including the title track. I think it's on that album. There's a good one called "Is There Life Out There?" And then she did a cover of the song "The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia," which is one of her biggest songs. Also in the 90s, she also had a big hit, "Fancy." That's probably one of her most recognizable songs. She had other big albums such as "Read My Mind," "What If It's You," and "If You See Him," all released in the 1990s, including hit songs like "Why Haven't I Heard From You?" You got "If You See Him, If You See Her." That's a duet with Brooks and Dunn. "How Was I to Know?" "The Heart Won't Lie" was a great hit song from the 90s, a duet with Vince Gill. So she had a ton of hits throughout the 80s and 90s. She also has an acting career as well. The first movie she was in the movie Tremors with Kevin Bacon, which is kind of a random role of hers, but that led to a pretty big acting career. Like she starred in a sitcom in the 2000s. I think she's on another sitcom now. I forget what it's called. She's also a coach on The Voice in more recent years. But she's still been putting out albums even into the 2020s. She's still putting out new music, and she's still had continued chart success. And people still recognize her for her sharp wit, her recognizable voice, and her very distinct songs. And I think along with Dolly Parton, she's probably one of the most recognizable female artists in country music. Like, people debate over who we should call the queen of country music. Some say Dolly Parton, some say Reba. But to be honest, I think you can make a strong argument for either artist, and I would be perfectly fine with either one. She sold 75 million records worldwide. She's placed 100 singles on the Billboard Country chart, 25 of which went to #1. So she has a lot of success in the country music world, and besides the acting, and I think she's done some Broadway and other business things. There's a lot of great stuff that she's been involved with over the years.
I agree. She's one of the biggest artists of the country music for me growing up. The song I loved was probably my favorite was uh, it's like something about a night in Georgia.
The
I know
night
you
the lights went out in Georgia.
the
That one.
night.
At the
Um,
night that the lights went out in Georgia.
yeah, that was the song that I really liked growing up.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, that was a good one. But yeah, she definitely. I was trying to think if she ever really crossed over to pop. It was mostly country, I suppose.
Yeah, I
But
don't think I can't think I don't think she had any big pop crossover hits like Dolly had,
right,
but
exactly.
she's still one of the more recognized artists in the genre though.
Even like Shania Twain, or would have
Yeah.
pop. Yeah,
Shania Twain had some crossover appeal.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, great pick. Definitely deserves there. All right, next band I'm gonna pick is the Goo Goo Dolls. Hopefully recognize. Again, I don't know if people talk about the Goo Goo Dolls so much outside the '90s, or as a band people talk about as one of the great bands. But I don't know. They're another band that had a lot of huge hits on the radio when I was growing up, and I never owned any of their albums or listened to their albums themselves. I just know their hits on the radio. What I was listening to, and really liked what I heard. Of course, they're an American rock band from Buffalo, New York. They formed around 1986, and basically it's two guys really formed the band, and that's their lead singer and guitar player John Resnick, who you probably have seen before. He's been around doing stuff here and there for a while. Great voice. And then Robbie Pollock is the bassist, and they've been in the band from the beginning. And I think they've had other different. That's only two members I wrote because I think they've had different members for like drummer and stuff like that. But those two have been together like the whole time. Basically, they actually started out as a punk band early on. They were kind of in the punk scene that was pretty popular in the '80s and early '90s, whatever. But then they kind of formed. Then they kind of switched and did more like that alternative rock, I guess, kind of type music. But they're not hard rock. I would never say they're like really hard rock type music. They're more like I said, Matchbox 20, like more softer rock type music. But their first big album actually was their fifth album. Really is when they started taking off, and that was A Boy Named Goo, which came out in 1995, and it went 2 times platinum, and it had one big hit on it, and that was called Name. And that's the first time I ever heard of them, because I remember that's, like I said, 95 was when I started listening to 90s music. And that's when I got into all these bands. And Name was a big hit on the radio, and I really liked that song. That's the first time I heard of them. So that was a big enough song. I kind of got some more momentum. And then their next album was their biggest album. That's called Dizzy Up the Girl, which came out in 1998. This was 4 times platinum, and it had some really big hits on it. Some of their biggest hits, like I said, I haven't really listened to the album. I definitely need to listen to Goo Goo Dolls more, especially this album. Slide, I love Slide. I remember first time hearing that on the radio, and like I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. It's so catchy. Yeah, loved how that went. Broadway, another great song. Black Balloon was a really cool song. And then their biggest song of all time is Iris that came off of that, which was in a movie with Nicolas Cage, I think, and I want to say Meg Ryan or something like that, where Nicolas played an angel. And I forget the name of the movie, but I never saw it. I don't know if it was that good of a movie. But this was a big song on that album, or yeah, that's a big song on that movie. And Iris went #1. It's their like maybe only #1 hit they had, but Iris is one of the biggest songs I would think of the '90s. I mean, everybody loved that song. I love that song. That's my favorite song from them, and all that. But yeah, that was really huge for them. Their next album was did decent as well, or maybe not the next. It's the eighth album. Sorry, their eighth album, Lit Love In, which came out in 2006, was #9 in the charts. It was certified gold. And it had it had 2 really good songs on it. Better Days, great song from them, and Give a Little Bit are 2 songs that are pretty big hits on the radio as well. But outside of that album, they didn't have any other really big albums. I haven't really looked too far into what it did, but that's kind of their big period, was that period. Especially Dizzy Up the Girl was huge for them. like I said. And overall, they had 7 top 40 singles, 3 top 10 singles, and 4 Grammy nominations. And so, yeah, this is based off of mostly, I remember hearing them on the radio, and I thought they were really cool, really liked the overall sound. So that's why I'm putting them here in the 90s Hall of Fame.
Yeah, like I've heard some Goo Goo Dolls. I'm not as familiar with them. A little, I know them a little more than I do Smashing Pumpkins, but I will admit Iris is a great song. I've always loved hearing that one. Also, I think the lead guy from the Goo Goo Dolls did a song from Treasure Planet called "I'm Still Here."
Yes.
That song is amazing.
That is really. Oh, I forgot about
that song.
That's a great soundtrack too. I love the songs on that movie, and that's a great song. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he got any Oscar nominations, and I was thinking, man, he should have got some Oscar nominations for.
Yeah, that would have been a good one to nominate.
Yeah, I don't think it got nominated.
Yeah,
it didn't. I'm pretty sure it didn't. All right, now we're to your 5th, I think.
All right, my next one. I'm going into R&B territory this time, and that is the group Boyz II Men.
Yeah,
they formed in 1985. They were originally a quartet. The members were Nathan Morris, Sean Stockman, Wanya Morris, and Michael McCary. Even though they formed in 1985, they didn't really break out until 1991 with their album Cooley High Harmony, which had a couple of big songs on it. They had more of a New Jack Swing style with the song Motown Philly, but it's still a catchy song. Then their breakout song was End of the Road, released in 1992. Incredible song. I think it's one of the best ballads of the 90s. I love the harmonies on that song are so good. Oh, now we've gone to the end of the road. Oh, it is so good. If you're not listening to the road, go listen to it. It's amazing. They had another big album, I think, in the mid '90s. I think it's called Two, and they had some other big hits throughout the '90s, particularly "I'll Make Love to You." That was a big song they had. Huge. And then their big collaborative song with Mariah Carey, "One Sweet Day." That's another amazing song as well. They had a song called "On Bended Knee," which took the #1 spot away from their last hit, "I'll Make Love to You," which made Boyz II Men the third musical act after the Beatles and Elvis to replace themselves on the Hot 100. So that's a neat little fact there. Boyz II Men is now a trio. They lost one of their members, Michael McCary. He left the group in 2003 because of health issues, but they've remained a trio ever since.
Oh, okay.
I can't name a Boyz II Men song or album after the 2000s, but they still perform even to this day. It looks like their latest studio album was in 2017 called Under the Streetlight. They received 4 Grammy Awards. They were even on The Masked Singer at one point. And it said they were the first group contestants to win. They competed as buffaloes. If you watch The Masked Singer, I've seen clips of that. I'm like, this is a weird show. I don't really have an interest in watching it, but it's still fascinating to people that they actually have on there put in these ridiculous costumes. And people are so shocked when they find out what's under the mask. But Boyz II Men, I love their harmonies. They have just some really great ballad songs in the 90s. They even have a couple good a cappella songs. Like there's one they did on the soundtrack to The Prince of Egypt. I think it's called "I Will Get There." Okay. Beautiful song. It's played during the end credits of the movie.
Okay.
But they have some great stuff. I think "End of the Road" alone is worthy of putting them in this Hall of Fame. I love that song.
Yeah, very unique. You don't really get groups like that anymore. They almost kind of remind me of like the Motown era of the four top. I mean, it's not that type of music, but it's where you have like four guys that just sing together and don't play instruments. And they just sound really great together. We had a couple of those in the 90s. There was another group I remember I used to listen to as well, but I'm the name of it. There was a couple of groups like that came out, and I'll Make Love to You. That was a big song on the radio. I remember that. That was kind of funny song. You're like, ooh, it's like kind of like hearing Marvin Gaye's, Let's Get It On. You're like, oh, okay, it's not very subtle.
Yeah.
But
Make love to you.
I need to listen to them. I haven't really listened to any albums, but I just remember those couple big hits. But they were big. They were pretty big though in the 90s. Good pick. All right, my next band I'm picking is a band called No Doubt. Yeah, this was American rock band from Anaheim, California. They formed in 1986, and they formed as a ska punk band, basically. And you can hear that in their music. If you ever heard the music, they have this kind of ska sound to them, which is not, we don't talk about ska very much. I don't even know how to describe it, but it definitely has a sound to it where you're like, okay, this is different kind of sound. It's not the kind of music I usually listen to, but yeah, they eventually made it pretty big in the 90s. I'll talk about it. But the main person you'll know from them is Gwen Stefani. Who was a singer. And and she's gone on to also have a pretty good solo career. She did songs in her solo career as well. I want to say she's married to a country music singer now.
She is now Blake Shelton.
Yeah, she married Blake Shelton, interestingly enough.
They have a couple of country songs together, which I'm not really that big on them as a couple, but I'll admit they do sing pretty good together if you give them the right song.
Yeah, I don't know. Was she on? She might have been on The Voice as well. I know Blake Shelton's on The Voice. But...
he was on The Voice. I think Gwen Stefani was on The Voice, and I think that's when they started doing their thing. Yeah,
because she was married to a rock singer for a while.
Yeah.
And Shelton was married to a country singer too.
Yeah, Blake was married to Miranda Lambert. That didn't last long.
Yeah, and so now those two connected, which is kind of funny because she's like comes from more rock and he's more country, but it works, I guess. But yeah, she's a great female. I would say maybe one of the best female lead singers of a rock band. Was huge, and she was so good, entertaining to watch. If you ever watch her on stage, I mean, she just has so much charisma, and the way she moves and with the songs. I mean, she's a lot of fun to watch. I don't know if she's that way anymore, but especially when she was younger, she really moved. She sweated because she just was constantly moving and stuff. She's a great lead singer. But you had Tom Dumont on guitar, Tony Kamal on bass, and Adrian Young on drums as well. But yeah, they started off, ska punk. Also, I know that her brother was the keyboardist when they first started in the 80s, and she was like the younger sister. So she kind of it formed before she got in, but then she kind of, because her brother was the keyboardist, she kind of got her way into it, and at a pretty young age, I think. There's also another guy that was in the group that also sang in the group, but he died of like a drug overdose, I think. And the brother quit the band after that. He was so distraught over his friend dying of a drug overdose. So he kind of quit and he wasn't part of the band anymore. And so then Stefani kind of took over as the lead kind of the band. And so the first couple albums, the first two albums didn't do particularly that great or anything, but it was the third album that came out really huge. And that was an album called Tragic Kingdom, which came out in 1995. Again, a lot of big albums came out in 1995. I'm gonna have to do something about 1995 being like, it's the best year of movies and best year of music. One of the best years of music, not the best year of music, but like the best year of 90s music. I feel like came out in 95. So many big albums for me. Maybe that's because 95 was the year I kind of started listening to 90s music. And man, I was getting Jagged Little Pill, Melancholy Sadness, What's the Story, Morning Glory, Tragic Kingdom. I mean, Dizzy Up, no, that was later. Boy Named Blue came out there. Anyways, a lot of great albums were coming out. But yeah, that album was huge. I remember that album coming out, and everybody had that album. It's definitely their biggest selling album. It went diamond, certified, and 60 million sold overall. Also, it was Grammy nominated for Best Rock Album. I think they're also nominated for like Best New Artist at that time or something. But yeah, they had a couple of big hits on there. Their biggest hit that really kind of got them on the map was a song called "Don't Speak," and that was a #1 single for them. It was #1 for 16 weeks. I mean, it was a huge. I remember first time hearing that on the radio and just loving that song. It was like, oh my gosh, this is like one of the greatest songs I've ever heard. And it's such a cool song because it comes from. And what's interesting about Tragic Kingdom is I think all the songs were written by Gwen Stefani because she was dating the bassist, and he broke up with her, and she was very like distraught and sad over the breakup, and so she wrote a lot of the songs for this album from being in a really bad state of mind. And Don't Speak, if you listen to that song, you kind of hear it's about it's about a breakup, but it's a great breakup song. Really good use of her voice. But yeah, and then there's a song called Just a Girl that was really huge on the radio. Spiderwebs was a minor hit that was on the radio, and Sunday Morning, all catchy songs. Like I said, Don't Speak is a more softer song, but Just a Girl is more of you hear more of that ska punk in it that they kind of got well. That was kind of, to me, there's such a unique sound. I never heard a band sound quite like No Doubt with the lead singer and the kind of ska punk sound. I thought it was really cool growing up. I was like, man, and yeah, and I didn't own this album, but I was like, man, that was an album I definitely would borrow from friends and listen to it and be like, man, I really love the sound of it. Yeah, she's married to Blake Shelton. Yeah. Anyway, so that was their big album that really put them on the map. It was one of the big bands of the 90s period. Their next album did pretty good as well. Return of Saturn came out in 2000. It was also nominated for a Grammy for Best Rock Album. It went #2 in the charts. And it had 2 big songs on it. Simple Kind of Life and Ex-Girlfriend were hits on the radio as well. And then their next album, Rock Steady, in 2001, was also nominated for Grammy for Best Pop Album. And it had a song called Hello Good and Hey Baby and Underneath It All were all 3 pretty hits off the album. So they had 3 albums here that all had big hits for them, I would say, and did pretty well overall. Outside of that, they didn't do anything. That was their biggest stuff right there. And then they made other albums, but they didn't reach the heights of those 3, I would say. So definitely I'd say anybody, definitely check out Tragic Kingdom. That's definitely their big album that you should listen to kind of get a good sense of who they are. But like I said, Gwen Stefani, to me, really became a huge star. Had some solo work as well, and then has been on TV a lot. But yeah, that's where she started, though, is with No Doubt, which is my pick for.
Yeah, I know Don't Speak and that Just a Girl. And I think that song what's the song? It's my life. Don't you forget. I don't know if you know that one.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. Those are all good songs. My favorite is probably "Don't Speak."
Oh yeah, that's the biggest from them.
Yeah. All right, so I got a band I'll talk about next. Formed in Columbia, South Carolina, and that is Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah.
I want to look at the members real fast. We got.
I know one member.
The lead guitarist is a guy named Mark Bryan. They have a bassist named Dean Felber, and then their percussionist is Jim Sonefeld. But the main guy that's commonly the kind of the face of Hootie and the Blowfish is a guy by the name of Darius Rucker.
Yep.
And they're primarily known for their 1994 debut album called Cracked Rearview, which is one of the best-selling albums of all time. It says it's certified platinum 22 times.
22 times.
3 top 10 singles, all great songs. Hold My Hand, incredible song. Let Her Cry, which is a great ballad. And then you have Only Want to Be With You, which is a really good little pop rock song. It's so good that it makes you cry for the Miami Dolphins. But they didn't really have that much big success after that album. I think some of the other albums didn't do as well, and they broke away in the 2000s. And Darius Rucker went on and had a successful solo career
Yeah.
as a country artist. Yeah, so which is kind of interesting because I first heard Darius Rucker through the country music stuff.
Okay.
He broke out as a country artist
Yeah.
in 2008. He had a #1 hit called "Don't Think I Don't Think About It," and it was kind of a big deal for me because you don't really think, oh, can a black guy sing country music?
Yeah.
That's not really. You don't really see too many of those in country music. Now that can be done. Charlie Pride was a legendary country artist that was black in like the 70s and 80s, and he's an awesome country artist. I love Charlie Pride. And Darius Rucker broke out in 2008 and kind of continued on that tradition of, hey, black people can be awesome in country music too. And it's kind of cool that like those two artists kind of helped break some of the boundaries in country music, that pretty much anybody can do country music, regardless of the color of your skin. But yeah, he has some great songs, even as a country artist. Of course, even when he was doing Hootie and the Blowfish, like his voices can fit whether you're in a rock band like Hootie and the Blowfish. And then that voice translated well even into his country stuff, which I think he was more of a country guy, but growing up, but he just happened to be fronting a rock band. But
Yeah.
it's cool that worked out. Hootie and the Blowfish actually did reform in 2019, and they actually did put out a new album called Imperfect Circle. So they're actually back making music and touring as the band, while Darius is also doing his solo work. So I think they're primarily, I guess, the one album wonder because of Cracked Rear View. But again, I love the hit songs on that album. And, Darius Rucker, he also is pretty successful as a country artist too. So I guess technically I got 4 country artists on this list if you include his solo stuff, which wasn't until years later. But still a great band. I love Darius Rucker's voice. And the big hit songs on here are awesome, particularly Let Her Cry. That one's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I remember that album again coming out, and yeah, that was huge. Everybody had that album. And those 3 songs were all over the radio. It's funny, yeah, they were huge, and then they disappeared. It was very weird. Like, everybody was talking about them, and then next thing I know, it's like nobody was talking about them. And also, what a great name for a band, Hootie and the Blowfish. It's so good. Like, Hootie? Who's Hootie? I'm like, his name's not Hootie. But yeah. Yeah, definitely belongs in there, I think, just for that album. It was so huge. But yeah. All right. Next band I'm going to talk about is a band called Dave Matthews Band. This is an American rock band from Charlottesville, Virginia. So we're kind of in your
close to my neck of the woods. Yeah, I've been to Charlottesville a few times.
That's the big city, I'm guessing there.
That's one of the big cities in Virginia. Yeah, that's where Monticello is, Thomas Jefferson's home.
I've been there. Yeah, really cool place. Yeah, so they're from Charlottesville. They formed in '91. Of course, the main person, the leader, is Dave Matthews. Obviously, that's the name of the band, Dave Matthews Band. Probably one of the most ununique band titles, probably, for a band. But yeah, Dave Matthews, lead singer, and played guitar. He really played acoustic guitar, though, was mainly his thing. Then he got a lot of different members of the band, because this was a very interesting band. Because he had a bass player, Stephen Lessard, Carter Buford on drums, and Tim Reynolds on lead guitar. And then you also had a horn section as well. Rashawn Ross on Jeff Coffin on saxophone. You also had Batty Strong on keyboards. I can't read my writing. And then you had a violin player, Boyd Tinsley, as well. So you had some horns, or you had trumpet, you had saxophone, you had a violin player. So very interesting kind of dynamic for a rock band time, and definitely very unique sound. I think Dave Matthews' voice is a very, and they did kind of this. I'm trying to think of how to even talk about their music, but um, I can't even really describe it. It's very fast paced with the horns sometimes and the violin, and but then he also got into some more softer stuff, more ballad stuff, which was great as well. They weren't hard rock at all. Like I said, he played the acoustic guitar was kind of the main instrument. It seems like you hear in the music, which was interesting. But yeah, Dave Matthews, great voice. He can hit high notes, pretty cool, and yeah, some really great stuff from them. But yeah, their debut album in 1994 was big for them, um, uh, called "Under the Table and Dreaming." Was their debut, and it went 6 times platinum. It was a #1, or I think, well, I don't know if it was pretty big, but it had the big hits on, 2 big hits on there that really got him going. And that was what would you say and Ants Marching, which are 2 really good songs, very catchy. Like I said, very upbeat, very catchy type music. But then their next album was even bigger, and that was called Crash, which I think is the album most people know them by. This came out in 1996. It went 7 times platinum and won a Grammy for Best Rock Performance. And it was I think it was #1 album as well. But it had 3 pretty big hits on it. So Much to Say, Too Much, and Crash Into Me. And Crash Into Me is probably the first song I heard on the radio from them. That really kind of got me into Dave Matthews. I remember hearing that on the radio, and it was a really cool song, a little bit softer. Again, Dave Matthews, he hits these really cool high notes in his music that I really like. But yeah, it's a little bit softer, not as upbeat as some of his other stuff. But that was a huge song on the radio, and that was a huge album for them. But even the next album, Before the Crowded Streets in 1998, also was a #1 album for them and went 4 times platinum. And that had 2 big hits on it, Don't Drink the Water and Crush. And Crush when I remember that song came out, and I loved that song. That was probably my favorite song for them for quite a while. It's definitely very more softy. I will say there's some jazz. I was trying to think how to describe them. I think there's some jazz in them because of the horns and the violin. They do throw a little bit of a jazz fusion kind of feel to them. I think that's interesting, along with maybe some rock and all that as well. Crush is a cool song if you ever haven't listened to that one. It's more softer. It's even a little bit slow, but then the chorus is just so catchy. I love it. And then the other album I'm going to talk about is this album called Every Day that came out in 2001. That also went #1, and it had a huge song on it called Faith. A really great song. One of my favorite songs from them anyways. And that album, I guess, was a little more, wasn't as much jazz fusion. It was a little more pop rock, and I guess, but some really good stuff there as well. And they made some other albums, but I just wrote those down as kind of the 4 big ones. But like every album did very well. Like every album sold well. All 4 albums were like #1 the charts. Lots of big hits from them. Definitely another band I want to dive into at some point because I do really like and Dave Matthews has gone on. He's acted in some stuff, I think, here and there. I've seen him. He's definitely been around doing stuff. But yeah, I think the band's still together, and they made an album not too long ago as well. So, but yeah, that's my next pick, Dave Matthews Band.
Yeah, that's an artist I've not really listened to much of. Like I know the name.
Yeah,
I think I've heard Ants Marching at least.
that's a great song.
So I guess that's another one I'm probably try to get into. At least them and the Smashing Pumpkins, they're kind of blind spots for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if people talk about Dave Matthews at one time. I remember they were talking about as like the greatest live band because their live performances was always. I was reading about them, and I remember this at the time. People talked about them being like the best live band to go see because they would change up their songs a lot, like the way they would sing them. So it seems like every performance was a new performance and unique, and you're never going to get it again kind of performance. So.
Yeah. I've also seen people also say they're an overrated band. So I guess there's some people that don't care for them.
They got some haters, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not one of them. So
No, I thought they were great in the '90s when I was listening to them. I haven't listened to them in a while, but
All right. So my next artist, my other Canadian artist, besides Bryan Adams, the next one I'm inducting is Eileen Regina Twain, otherwise known as Shania Twain.
She's Canadian.
Yeah, she is Canadian. Yeah. Um, one of the best-selling music artists of all time, and she is actually the best-selling female artist in country music history. It's kind of shocking because you think, oh, Dolly Parton sold more albums, but no, it's actually Shania Twain has sold more albums out of any female artist in country music. She is known as the queen of country pop because she definitely kind of blurred the line between country and pop, even though she primarily put out country albums, but she also had crossover appeal. You can kind of view her as kind of like Taylor Swift if Taylor Swift was big in the
Yeah.
90s, pretty much. But she grew up in Ontario, Canada. She was always into singing and songwriting at a young age. Her debut album, which was self-titled, was released in 1993, but it was a big failure. It was not that successful of an album. Then she met a man by the name of Robert John Lang, otherwise known as Mutt Lang. And Mutt Lang he primarily produced at that time like hard rock albums. Like he did work for acts like AC/DC and Def Leppard. So she and him got to meet. They actually got married, and he actually produced all her albums. They co-wrote every single song together, and he would produce her albums. And so that led to her second album, The Woman in Me, and that was her first breakout album, selling 20 million copies, spawning 8 singles. The biggest one of the bunch is Any Man of Mine, which was a song that actually earned her a Grammy. Pretty big song of hers. A couple other big songs from there as well, including I think No One Needs to Know is another big song on that album, which is actually in the movie Twister. Then you have Come On Over, which was her next studio album, which is recognized by Guinness World Records as the biggest selling studio album by a female solo artist. Wow. I don't know if that's still the record today, considering some of the albums that are coming out today, but at least at that time, it was one of the biggest selling albums of all time. It sold over 40 million copies. And this album produced 12 singles. 12 out of the 16 songs on Come On Over were released as hit songs.
And many of them that were hits that I know of.
Many of them are her most iconic songs. You got songs like You're Still the One, which is a beautiful love ballad. You got Man, I Feel Like a Woman. It's probably one of the best like female anthem songs ever written, and it's awesome. And even men can sing along to the song too, just for goofy fun.
Man, I feel like
a woman. Da, 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 da. It's such a catchy earworm of a song. It's words and everything. That Don't Impress Me Much is another one of her big songs from that album. Another good ballad with From This Moment On. So many great songs. Earned more Grammy Awards from that album. Then she had a follow-up in 2002 with Up, and that spawned some other big singles like the title track and I'm Gonna Get You Good. And that was my introduction to Shania, was that album, Up. And I'm going to confess this. Shania Twain was the first singer that I had a crush on. She was so beautiful in her prime. She, especially if you watch some of her music videos in the late 90s and the 2000s, she was so beautiful to look at. And mixed with the great songwriting and some great songs that kind of blended the line between country and pop, I can see why she sold that many shows and sold albums and had big hits and everything. After 2004, she disappeared. She had a greatest hits album, had a couple of big songs from it. She disappeared. And for the longest time, I was wondering, what the heck happened to Shania Twain? Where was all that great music? Well, behind the scenes, there was a lot of struggles. She actually was diagnosed with, she went on hiatus because she had Lyme disease. And after she had that, she nearly lost her singing voice. And that wasn't detailed for several years until after she got out of it. And people didn't know that. People were concerned about her. And I didn't know that until many years later. Also, there were some personal problems. Shania and Mutt Lange went for a really, really nasty divorce. Mutt was unfaithful to her, and I think he had an affair with like her best friend or something like that. It was really nasty stuff, and that hurt her for a while, especially since Mutt Lange was the one that pretty much helped give her the big career that she got. And they co-wrote all the songs together. So it's like, can I do this just by myself? And after all that struggle, she is still now coming out of hiatus. She's still selling tickets. She's still selling shows. She doesn't have the big hits like she used to, but she has at least 2 albums since her long hiatus. I think one came out in 2017 and the other came out, I think, as late as 2023. She's also done acting roles. She had a supporting role in a faith-based film a few years ago. I think it was I Still Believe. I think I saw her in that.
Okay.
Pretty solid acting there. I think she was also played Mrs. Potts in like a live production of Beauty and the Beast. I thought she was miscast in that, but
Yes.
I thought she was miscast in that, but it was still interesting that she was in that.
Yeah.
But like I've listened to some of her later stuff. It doesn't quite hit the heights of her early stuff. Like you can tell her voice is noticeably weaker compared to during her prime. I think that was just like maybe the negative effects of like almost losing her voice because of the Lyme disease. But if we're going by what Shania in her prime, like The Woman in Me, Come On Over, Up, those 3 albums, and like the big album sales, the big hit songs, and being kind of a trailblazer and like having distinctly country songs, but you can also have crossover success and put them on pop radio. That's more than enough to say, yeah, she's worthy of being on this list.
Oh yeah, one of the biggest singers of the 90s, 2000s, whatever period for sure. Yeah, because I even heard her music on the regular stations, to be honest. I think those ones that we talked about on that Come On Over album, I think were on the as well. So
yeah,
and her music video is good too.
Yeah, I've always loved the music video for Man, I Feel Like a Woman. That's a great music video.
That's a good music video. Yeah, and You Don't Press Me Much was good as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that leopard outfit.
Yeah, and I love her ballads too. Like Still the One's probably my favorite song. That's a good song.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately that marriage didn't work out.
Yeah, that song is about their marriage.
I know.
It's like it's kind of sad, but it's still a great song.
Sweet song. But that happens all the time. My younger sister actually went. Her and her friends went and saw Shania Twain concert here in Kansas City, at the big arena that they have here in Kansas City. And she said it was a pretty good concert. I guess she had a good time. And my sister was not even a country music fan, so I didn't even know. I was kind of surprised when she's like, and this was just this last year, right? She was like, "Yeah, we're gonna go see Shania Twain." I'm like, "Really?" Like, I never was being a Shania Twain fan, you know. We never.
I've heard some of her newer shows aren't the best. I think people are like split on like how she sings and how she looks. So it's like, so your sister saying she did good. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, she seemed to like it, so I'm like, okay, that's cool. Yeah. And she was also I remember singing at the Super Bowl one year. She did a pretty good job doing the halftime show.
Oh, okay.
um, yeah, I can't remember when that was, but I remember that. And she looked pretty good. I remember that. Like, whoa. I don't know how old she is, but like even her older age, I thought she
Uh,
looked pretty.
I got it on the Wikipedia page now. She's 59.
Yeah, still not bad looking for her age.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so we're gonna go from that to another female singer of the '90s period, and that is Sheryl Crow. This is the next person I'm gonna talk about, and she's an American pop. She's interesting. She's kind of pop, folk, some country, some rock. Kind of mixes different stuff in. But she's from Kennett, Missouri, so kind of close to where I'm at um, here in the Midwest. But interesting, she first started off as a backing vocalist for Michael Jackson, which is
Oh,
pretty
wow.
cool.
I did not
And
know that.
yeah, me either. And I was looking her up, and I was like, whoa! Like, so she started off doing backing vocals, and she did backing vocals for Stevie Wonder, Jimmy Buffett, and Don Henley were some of the acts that she did backing vocals for. So that's kind of how she got into the music business. Uh, then in '93, she came out with her debut album, which I actually have. Another YouTuber named Rob. His channel is Rob Secure, and he's bought me a lot of CDs because he has a huge collection, and he gives me some of the CDs that he has like doubles of or something, or he doesn't need, and he'll send them to me, which is very nice of him. And yeah, he sent me this one, which is interesting. It's called Tuesday Night Music Club, and it's Tuesday night, so it works out here.
Hey, it kind of feels like we're in the Tuesday night music club.
Tuesday Night Music Club. Uh, but yeah, I can't believe how young she looks because when I first kind of knew her, she was like already getting to like age 40, which I'll talk about here. Um, but yeah, this is their their first album, and I haven't heard that whole album, but uh, she did good though. 7 million copies sold, did pretty well, and she had some big hits. She had two big hits on here. Big one, "All I Want to Do," that was on the radio. I do remember that being on the radio a lot. And yeah, if you know that song, it's such a catchy. All I want to do is have some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, very catchy song. Also, "Strong Enough" was a really good song off this album. And she ended up winning, or she ended up, let's see, I guess she got nominated for 3 Grammys. Actually, in '95. This came out in '93, but actually, her song "All I Want to Do" didn't really catch on till like '94. So it's funny. The album didn't really do that well when it first came out. It was like not until like '94 that "All I Want to Do" became a huge radio hit. And then once that became a radio hit, her album started selling really well. But it didn't really sell well until about '94. And then she had that. So then she didn't get nominated for Grammys until '95. What's interesting for this album, but she was nominated for Best New Artist, Record of the Year, and Best Female Pop Vocal Performance. So pretty good for her first album. Anyways, really got on the map just by those two big hits, and her album doing pretty well there. So then in '96, she came out with her self-titled album, Sheryl Crow, which went 3 times platinum. Also had like nominated for 2 Grammys, Best Rock Album and Best Female Rock Performance, which is interesting because I think of more of the pop singer, but got her in the rock because she did a little more rock on this album. The big song for me, probably the first song I heard from her that really kind of was like, man, I really like her voice, and that is "If It Makes You Happy." I love that song. I remember hearing that on the radio and just, man, when she sings that, "If it makes you happy," like, oh my gosh, her vocals are so good. Yeah, one of her big songs. But she also had "A Change Will Do You Good" and "Every Day Is a Winding Road," which was also a big hit off that album. So another really first 2 albums really big for her. A lot of, again, selling well, Grammy nominations, hit songs, all that. In '97, she got to sing the James Bond song "Tomorrow Never Dies" off of the movie, the Pierce Brosnan, his second movie, and she got nominated for a Grammy and a Golden Globe for that song. But unfortunately, no Oscar nomination. But she got a Grammy and Golden Globe nomination, which I love that song. It's actually one of my favorite James Bond songs. Again, very good voice, I think, on that. Very catchy. So yeah, she's doing very well at this point. In 1998, she came out with an album called The Clubs, which went number 5, sold 2 million. Got nominated again for Album of the Year, Best Rock Album. And her big hit off of that was My Favorite Mistake, which was a great song. It's another favorite of mine from her. But it feels like every album, she's just one big hit after another. And like I said, then we get to the 2000s. That's just the 90s. And then the 2000s, she actually did a single. She came out with a single called, it was a cover of Sweet Child of Mine, Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
And it won her a Grammy for Best Female Rock Performance. So actually, I didn't know that. I didn't even know she sang that song, but she won a Grammy for it. Put that out. And then in 2001, she did a live recording song, There Goes the Neighborhood, and she won a Grammy for Best Female Rock Performance for that year. So 2 years in a row, Best Female Rock Performance. Then 2002, she did an album called Come On, Come On, which went platinum. And this had a huge hit on it called Soak Up the Sun. And I remember that coming out. And that's the first time I really saw her in a music video. And she's like out in this beach, and she's really good looking. And I remember it was like, she's 40 at this point. I'm like, she's 40? Like, man, she's good looking. And of course, I was young. Now I'm 40. 40 is not that old. But when I was young, I was like, 40? That's so old. And I was like, man, she's good looking. And that's such a catchy song. Really good song. One of the best summer songs of all time. Just talking about soaking up the sun. 2003, she had a single called Steve McQueen, which won her a Grammy for Best Female Rock Performance. So third time she won a Grammy for Best Female Rock Performance. So, I mean, doing really, really well. Besides that, I haven't really looked up too much more over albums after that, but that was definitely her high period where, like I said, winning 3 Grammys almost in a row, basically, for female rock performance. All her albums were doing well, and lots of hit songs from her, I think. And also a song, I think she wrote a lot of her songs. So, I mean, to me, just one of the best female singers and songwriters of the 90s period.
Yeah, like I know a little bit of Shania. I'm still thinking Shania Twain. I just saw Scott's comment. That's why.
Yeah, I was gonna. Never knew Shania Twain was married to Mutt Lange. I didn't know who Mutt was. So.
Yeah, that's how I first knew Mutt Lange, because of his involvement with Shania Twain. I think a lot of the Shania Twain fans, even though he's still a well-respected producer, Shania fans put him in a really bad light because of what he did to her.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, but yeah, Sheryl Crow. I know like the big songs. I think she's good. I like some of those songs.
Yeah,
special shout out to Real Gone, which is in Cars. I've always been a fan of that one. The Cars soundtrack.
Real Gone. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, she did that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think didn't she do a duet with Kid Rock?
She did a duet with Kid Rock. Picture. That's another good one that I've always liked.
Feels more that song, right?
It has more of a country rock feel to it. I heard that song growing up on country radio, and it was a big song.
That was a pretty big song.
Yeah.
I guess he worked with Def Leppard, Foreigner, and lots of other big names.
Yeah, and I think he worked with AC/DC too. I think. Didn't he produce Back in Black, I think?
Wow, big album.
All right, so my next band, speaking of rock, this is probably the biggest rock band I got on 90's Hall of Fame. Yeah. And it is a band called the Foo Fighters. They formed in Seattle, Washington in 1994. It started off as a one-man project by Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl formerly was the drummer of Nirvana, and after Nirvana dissolved after the unfortunate death of Kurt Cobain, Dave Grohl's like, you know what, I need to do some more music. I want to make more music. And so he formed the Foo Fighters, but instead of drumming, he decided to be lead singer and guitarist. Yeah. You also have, I think most of the original lineup is still there. Nate Mendel is the bassist. Chris Shiflett is the guitarist, along with Pat Smear. Rami Jaffe on the keyboards. And then they had Taylor Hawkins was the original drummer of the Foo Fighters, and he died in like 2022, and they have different drummers now that play. And
He was a drummer on,
well.
by the way.
So, like I said, Dave Grohl was originally, I think it was just him originally.
Yeah.
The debut album is just Dave Grohl. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. He
That's
did
what,
the whole album by himself in 6 days. And then afterward, more artists was added into the Foo Fighters over time. They had some pretty successful albums in the 90s, including The Color and the Strange and There Is Nothing Left to Lose. And I know some of the hits that were big from them in the 90s. I think Everlong was a big song from them around this time. One of the most recognizable songs. And there's also one called My Hero is another really good song.
great song.
They had other successful albums in the 2000s. One by One, In Your Honor, and then Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace. I'm not, to be honest, I'm not like a diehard listener of the Foo Fighters, so I can't say what are like the big songs on each album, but I know throughout the 2000s they had other big hit songs. The Passenger is a very fast-moving rock song. It's really good. Probably my favorite Foo Fighter song is probably The Best. That's a really good song. Someone give you the best, the best, the best, the best of you.
So
that one is so good. And they had other albums moving into the 2010s, including 2011's Wasting Light, Sonic Highways, 2014, Concrete and Gold, 2017. And they're still having successful albums even into the 2020s, even after the death of their original drummer. Their recent album came out in June 2023 called But Here We Are, and they're still putting out albums. They've won 15 Grammy Awards. They won Best Rock Album 5 times.
Yeah.
Which is, they're one of the most successful rock acts in Grammy's history. They're a band, I probably need to do a bigger deep dive on them at some point. And I guess since I'm going through Nirvana, maybe I can segue into the Foo Fighters after that, since Dave Grohl's in both bands. But from what I've heard, they do have some good rock songs. They're probably one of the more recognizable rock bands that's currently playing today that's still very, very successful. I do like Dave Grohl as a vocalist. He definitely can belt it out very good. And like the big hit songs are really, really good and worthy to be of the 90s Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, the fact that they won 5 like rock Grammy or whatever, that's insane. Like they're like every rock album they make like wins a Grammy.
The Grammys like it at least.
The Grammys love them. Yeah, I can't remember but the Everlong and My Hero. Oh my gosh, those songs were so good. Those were like the 2 big ones growing up. That was on the radio a lot, and definitely the big highlights. And if you watch them in concert, like it's fun watching them play those, and the crowd gets into it as well. Also, I think it's called "Learn to Fly."
I forgot about that one. And that technically was the first Foo Fighters song I ever heard because it was on Rock Band.
Yeah,
I love that song. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that was huge, and the music video is very funny. That's one of the funniest music videos I've ever seen when they're on the airplane. But yeah, definitely really great rock band. And I saw them. They got inducted just a year or 2 ago into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah, 2 great singers in Nirvana. wonder it's something can secretly sing better than both of them. Is that the basis?
Okay.
uh,
I didn't know there was another singer in Nirvana. I just thought it was just the Kurt Cobain show.
yeah, it was just Kurt Cobain. Who knew? Yeah, the drummer, and he wasn't even the first drummer. He was like the third drummer for the band. Or
Yeah,
something.
because I listened to their debut album Bleach, and Dave Grohl wasn't even on that one.
Yeah,
He didn't join until their big album.
that's kind of funny how he was like the third drummer or something like that. He went on to have a huge career as a front man.
Yeah, I don't even know if he still drums anymore.
Yeah, I mean, sure he could, but yeah, he.
Look,
All right,
I'd rather be the singer guy from the Foo
yeah,
Fighters.
yeah, and it works out really well. Like you don't see that happen very often. The drummer. I mean, we've seen Phil Collins and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
anyways, but next band I'm going to induct is the Counting Crows. This is an American rock band from San Francisco, California, and they formed in '91. Again, the lead singer Adam Duritz, really great voice. I love his one of my favorite singers, rock band singers, and they're not really they don't really do heavy rock. They do again more popular type rock, I think. They can do a little bit of hard every once, not very often. They do some ballads as well, but very catchy music. Adam Duritz just has an amazing voice. And he's kind of the most well known. He has a kind of unique look to him. If you see his music videos, uh, yeah, it's hard to tell even where because he sometimes he has like almost like I don't know, cornrows or something. Not cornrows, but he like his hair he like braids differently. Um, but then you got David Bryson on guitar, Jim Bogios on drums, Charlie Gillingham on keyboards, and David Emmergluck does multiple instruments. Millard Powers on bass, and Dan Vickery on guitar. So a lot of guitar players and different type of players on that band. Um, they first big album, their debut album, came out in 1993 called August and Everything After, and it's a really good album. I'm a big fan of that one. It sold 7 million. Of course, the first big song that really got them kind of noticed was Mr. Jones, which I'm sure everybody, if you've listened to 90s music, you've heard Mr. Jones. That song was huge, and it was all over. It's such a unique sound. I think Mr. Jones and me on the radio. It's such a cool song. And again, Adam Duritz, he's really why this band is so good. I think he's such a good lead singer and has such an interesting sound to him. Also, Around Here was huge on the radio. That's another absolutely fantastic song. One of my favorites on them. And then Rain King also was a really good song. It came off this album. Yeah, so overall, I got 2 Grammy nominations for Best Rock Performance and Best New Artist. So definitely from the very start, they kind of got really noticed and became huge. And then their next album was even bigger. In 1996, their second album, Recovering the Satellites, which was 2 times platinum and went #1 on the charts. And I actually owned this album when I was, again, younger. This was the second album I think I bought on CD. I bought What's the Story, Morning Glory, and then I bought this one on CD after that. And I bought it for one reason because of the song Long December. It was their biggest hit, really probably the biggest hit they ever had. That was huge on the radio, but I love that song. I remember first time hearing that song on the radio, and it's like, holy cow, this is so good. Again, it's a little bit of a more slower, softer piano song, to be honest, which they didn't do that often. But again, love Adam's voice. The chorus is so good. Yeah, I remember I was like, I got to get this album. And that's what I did back in the day. If I heard a really good song, I was like, I'm going to go buy the album and hope the rest of the album is good. But this album is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love this album. It's in my top 100 favorite albums. I think I've talked about it already. I give it a 10 out of 10. And I even had it on the first album we did on our album exchange. It was the first album I put that we all listened to anyway. So I've talked about it on there. It's definitely an album, if you haven't listened to, I think you got to listen to. I mean, both their debut and this album are some of their biggest hits and best well-known songs. And again, I just love Bert's voice and the overall sound of these albums. Angels of the Silences also was a hit on the radio, and that's their heaviest rock song I think they ever had. That's some pretty heavy guitar on there. It's pretty fast paced. It's another really great song off that album. And I actually went and saw Counting Crows in concert back in 2018, I think, or 2019. I got to go see him in concert here in Kansas City by the Kansas City Zoo. There's a outside theater called Starlight Theater, and that was great. And I don't know if I've told the story before, but I bought tickets. You know, I always buy like cheap tickets, and so I usually sit up way up high, but I don't care. I was like, I just want to be there, you know. And I bought them because I was just like, when they were coming out, I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much, you know, nostalgia for the band because I remember buying that CD when I was younger and loving that CD. And so I had to go see them. And luckily they weren't very expensive, so I bought a ticket not much. And I was by myself sitting up there, like, you know, like an hour or more before the start of the concert. And a guy came up to me that worked there and said, "Do you want a better seat?" And I was like, "Yeah, like of course I do." And he handed me a ticket that got me into like the first 5 rows or something like that. It's like this VIP section, almost like not VIP, but it's like you had to go through another security thing to get to the to the front part of the stage or front part of the whatever the rows. And so I couldn't believe it. That's the best seat I've ever had in my life at a concert, and I got it for free basically, you know, or for a cheaper ticket. And that was so cool getting to see a band that I loved since I was a kid, and got to see them live, and it was great. And they played a lot of their big off of these 2 albums. Really, really cool to see. And Adam Jork still sounds great when I heard him last, anyways. But yeah, so I got a lot of connection to Counting Crows because of that. But the next album, The Desert Life, came out in 1999, and that had one big song on it called Hanging Around. Another great song for them. It did okay. And they've done some other albums that I heard that I didn't think were that great. Like I've listened to, I think, most of their albums. And to me, the first 2 albums are the albums you have to listen to. Those are so good. The other albums, it's like I'm not as crazy about. But also, I have to mention, and I'm sure Jacob knows this, they got Oscar nominated for Accidentally in Love from the movie Shrek 2 in 2004. So that's kind of cool. They got nominated for an Oscar, which I love that song. That's one of my favorite songs from them. It's such a catchy, upbeat song. I would say different from most of their music. It doesn't really sound like most of the stuff they do, but oh my gosh, it's played in the movie Shrek 2, like towards the beginning of the movie. Anyways, and they didn't play it in concert. I was so mad. I was like, why didn't you play that in concert? That was your Oscar nominated song. But I don't know. They didn't play that one. They also do a really great cover, I think, of Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi. He does a cover of that. That was on the radio. I think that's a really good song. And he didn't play that in concert either. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like 2 songs I wanted to hear, and he didn't play them. But they did play Alone December, and that was amazing. Like I'm so happy I got to hear them play that song live. I love that song. It's still my favorite song from them. But yeah, I know it's been going on a long time, but that's what I think about Counting Crows and why they had to be in the 90s, because I have a lot of nostalgia for them.
Yeah, I only know like 3 songs from them. Like you mentioned the 3, Mr. Jones, the Big Yellow Taxi cover, believe it or not.
You know, okay.
I know that cover. I heard that one before Joni Mitchell's. And of course, Accidentally in Love, which is probably my favorite song that I've heard of the 3. It's a great song.
Very poppy, very catchy.
Love that song, yeah.
Yeah, definitely check out these albums I've been mentioning. I think you'd like him, Scott.
Yeah. And I think Scott, you mentioned on our group chat, like the 90s is now the most underrated decade in music. He said that the other day. I'm like,
I know.
You might be on to something there.
I love the 90s, but that's because I grew up in the 90s and I was hearing these songs for the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my next artist, this is the final country artist that I got. That I'll be inducting for this Hall of Fame. That's an artist, Jason, I know you know so well. I think you have 2 of his albums on vinyl, a couple of his albums on vinyl at least.
Yeah, and I got 2, I think, on CD. Yeah.
Yep.
I got 4 of his albums.
His name is Troy Garth Brooks. Yeah, his name is Troil.
Troil. Oh my God.
Troil. Imagine, imagine if that was the name he was trying to go by. Ladies and gentlemen, singing the dance, Troil Brooks. No, I think Garth Brooks is a better name to go as your stage name. Was born
Yeah.
in Tulsa, but he was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma.
He is one of the biggest selling artists of all time.
Oh,
Let's see. He sold more than 170 million records.
yeah.
Uh, he has, oh, let's see. It says as of 2020, according to the RIAA, he is the best selling solo artist in the United States with 162 million domestic units sold, ahead of Elvis, which is
Oh
insane.
yeah. Insane.
But yeah, so he has that much success there. Um, he has 9 albums that were certified diamond. The only artist in music history to have that many albums certified diamond. He surpassed the Beatles record on that. The Beatles have 6. Um, so 9 of his albums sold huge. Of course, he started off with his debut album. I've actually gone through his discography on my channel. So his debut album came out in 1989. Pretty big album. It's got a couple big hits on it. His debut single, "Much Too Young," then a really great ballad, "If Tomorrow Never Comes," and then the biggest song, "The Dance," which I still
My,
contend is his best song. It's a
my,
beautiful ballad.
yeah.
Really good song. Then you have "No Fences," his follow-up album, which is even better than the last album, having hit songs like "The Thunder Rolls," which is one of my favorites.
Good.
"Friends in Low Places." You
Yeah.
got "Unanswered Prayers," which is another great story song, great
Great.
message behind it. "Rope in the Wind" is another great album with songs like "Shameless," the Billy Joel cover, which is even better than Billy Joel's version.
I,
I love that song. You got, I think, "The River" is a big song on that album. Uh,
River's great.
"Papa Love Mama" is another one. Uh, "Rodeo" is another one. So some great songs there. When you got "The Chase" following up after that with hit songs like "We Shall Be Free" and "That Summer." "In Pieces," which is my favorite Garth album, with hit songs. Probably his most consistent album out of all the albums he's put out, with songs like uh, "Ain't Going Down Till the Sun Comes Up," "Calling Baton Rouge," "Standing Outside the Fire,"
Yeah,
"American
great.
Honky Tonk Bar Association." Just some other great hit songs there.
Yeah.
He's had other successful albums throughout the '90s. "Fresh Horses," "Sevens." He did that one weird album in '99 where he pretended to be a man named Chris Gaines, and
What a
terrible album. I don't want to talk about that one. But then "Scarecrow" was another solid album in 2001. He went on hiatus after that because there were some he was conflicted about his music career. He had problems with his record label, and then there was some issues with family. He went for a pretty nasty divorce around this time, and I think his mom died as well. So there was some family struggles. So Garth decided after the Scarecrow album, "I'm going to retire from music," because he had, I think, 3 daughters.
yeah.
"I'm going to retire from music so I can raise my girls, make sure they grow up and live a normal life. And when they graduate and grow up, I'll go back to doing music." And so that's what he did. He would do an occasional tour then and there, and I think even an occasional album and an occasional hit song, one of which was on a compilation album in 2007, the Ultimate Hits, I think is what it was called. There was a song from it called "More Than a Memory," which that was the first time on country radio where a song came out and immediately debuted at number one. That Garth Brooks song. That was the first song that ever did that on country radio, and it was a huge song for him. He officially came out of retirement in 2014, and he's put out consistent albums since then. I've heard some of his later stuff. I've not listened to his later albums because they're hard to find, but I've heard some of the newer singles, and I don't think they're near as good as during the early run of songs. He just had some great material in his classic run. I love that. Yeah, he did. He's primarily a country artist, but he also had some rock influences in there as well. I think he always said like Kiss was one of his biggest influences, and you can see that particularly in his stage shows, where he would like go out and have like these very energetic live stage shows. Like if you were there, Jason, when Garth was big, I know like he would like be on these wires. He'd fly around stage singing and do some crazy stuff.
A huge stage, that he would run around on.
Yeah, so he had some crazy live shows back in the day. I do think one of my I will admit this, even though I love his music. I think Garth is a little behind the times. Like none of his albums are on Spotify.
I know.
I think that's part of the reason why I think he's lost relevance in recent years, because like most artists put their music out on Spotify and people can stream the music. And if you love streaming these artists, you go out and buy the album. But Garth doesn't do that. He's like, no. You got to go buy my albums in the stores. And and I think he has like a streaming deal with Amazon, but that's about it. And like, who goes to Amazon to listen to music? He had his most recent album came out in 2023 called Time Traveler. You can only buy that in one store, and that's become a running joke on my channel.
Okay.
Between me and Jacob Collins, 3D Movie Cinema. You can only buy his new album at Bass Pro Shops.
Crazy.
I don't know why, but Bass Pro Shops, which is kind of a niche market of stores, it's only in select areas. That's where you can buy the new Garth Brooks album. It's crazy, but
Jake's not here to talk about and the. If we were on Jacob's channel, he'd probably approach or he'd appear and talk about it.
Yeah, but you know what? I love his old albums. He still has popular songs you still hear on the radio today, country radio. So many great hit singles. One of my favorite country artists growing up. Even with the lack of relevance today, I still respect him for his old hits. And he has some great stuff that formed my love and enjoyment for country music. So, Garth Brooks.
Yeah, as you see, I have 4 of his albums, so I'm a fan as well. I was a huge fan in the 90s. Actually, I actually listened to country music in the early 90s, and he was my favorite artist. And we had a lot of his early albums on cassette tape when I was growing up. And that was before I got into the Beatles. And then when I got into the Beatles, I didn't listen to Garth Brooks as much, but I still have a lot of nostalgia for Garth Brooks in the early 90s and growing up and listening to him and being a huge fan. In my opinion, I would say he's probably the biggest artist of the 90s. I think he was so huge. Definitely the biggest country singer of the 90s, I think. Maybe you'll...
you can say that. I think the Academy of Country Music, or the ACMs, they do a thing called the Artist of the Decade. He was the Artist of the Decade in the 90s.
Okay. I know you're a big fan of, what's his name?
George Strait.
George Strait, you probably
George Strait got it too. He got that in the 2000s.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't snub him.
But Garth Brooks had I feel like a lot of crossover appeal. I don't know. That I liked a lot about him. Like the dance, that was so good.
Yeah.
Not just
sorry. when I did my Garth Brooks live stream about a year ago, I kind of made the comparison to there's an artist that's big now, Morgan Wallen, who has that kind of crossover appeal today. Where he's primarily country, but some of his songs have like hip hop productions in them and pop productions, and yeah, he's big as a country artist, but he's a big crossover artist as well. I think you could say Garth Brooks was the Morgan Wallen of the '90s in a way.
I feel like he made popular the mic that you wear that goes on your head or something like that. And,
Yeah,
you don't have to hold your and that way he can run around the stage, which is really cool. And to me, he was the first guy I ever saw do that, where he had a handless mic or whatever you call it that he couldn't run around. And we used to have the DVD of one of his or not DVD, VHS tape. Sorry, this is back. Yeah, VHS tape. We have VHS tape of his concert, like a concert that you could buy on VHS or something. And yeah, in one point, him and another guy smashed their guitars together. I mean, it was crazy. Like I was like, what the heck is going? But yeah, it was a cool concert footage. I haven't seen him in concert. I would love to see him in concert. I think it'd be such a blast. He seems like such a nice guy too. I don't know. He seems like one of the nicest guys. And, besides, he married Trisha Yearwood, and
he would later do that. I think they married in 2005. And they even like before that happened, like they had a couple of good duets together. Yeah. One of them being "In Another's Eyes."
Other Eyes, that's a great song.
I love that song.
But yeah, him and Trisha Yearwood, I see them together all the time, and they sing together and they sound great. They recently just sang at Jimmy Carter's funeral. They sang the song "Imagine."
Yeah, I think kind of an odd choice to sing at a funeral.
I think it was them that sang, if I remember right. Because I remember seeing them singing recently, and they sang the song.
Yeah, I do know Garth recently sang at his funeral, but it wasn't a big I don't know. You're doing a funeral for somebody that had a lot of strong religious ties, and you sing the song "Imagine There's No Heaven." It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it is a weird. That's a weird song. You're right.
Like what?
Yeah, I don't know who thought that idea. And I just want to say I love this album cover. It's one of my favorite. I love the black and white, and I love the shirts and the hat and everything. It looks great. But yeah. All right, let's get to my. Got two more left. I'm sorry we didn't pick Third Eye Blind, and I do really love Third Eye Blind's first album. It's a great. But I haven't delved enough into them to put them in the.
I only know the one song. I think it's called "Semi Charmed Life."
My Charmed Life was huge. I love it. The first album was great, but I haven't really delved into them enough to put them on the 90s Hall of Fame. But there's so many other good artists I had to put here, including what I'm going to put next. One of the biggest rock bands of the 90s, and that is Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is really, really divisive because Briar doesn't like them. I know Nick doesn't like them. A couple people I've talked to really hate them, and I've talked to other people that really hate Red Hot Chili Peppers. But I've talked to people that love them too. They're definitely a band that you can love or hate because they definitely have a unique sound to them. They got a lot of funk in them and punk and stuff like that amongst their kind of hard rock sound. But yeah, they're an American band from Los Angeles. They formed together in 1982. The frontman, lead singer Anthony Kiedis, is the lead. Yeah, he just does the lead singing. Probably most known is Flea, the bass player. Really iconic name, and one of the greatest bass players I think of all time. And he's so fun to watch how he slaps that bass, man. He's really slapping it, and he's really moving. Like they're a fun band to watch, and man, they move and they're headbanging, and they're just constantly like you're like, how the heck are they? They're moving so much and still can play. So cool. They've had a couple different guitarists. I wrote down their main guitar player kind of during their big period. John Frusciante, if I'm pronouncing that right, was one of the guitar players. Wasn't the original guitar player, and Chad Smith, who's kind of their main drummer, though he wasn't the first drummer, but he's been with the band for a long time. The original band, the first guitar player, they of course had a horrible heroin addiction, The lead singer had a horrible addiction, and also the guitar player. And the guitar player, they made some albums. They none of the first, I think, several albums, first 3 albums or so didn't really do much. Um, but the, basically around '88, their guitar player died of a heroin overdose, I believe, and their drummer quit as well because he was distraught over the guitar player dying. And Anthony went to rehab and tried to get sober, though he went to rehab quite a bit because he had a really bad drug addiction. Anthony, interesting enough, was a kid actor. He acted in some shows as a kid, and he got into drugs at a young age. I've seen a whole documentary on them, and yeah, his life was messed up. He had a pretty bad parents and all that. Anyways, but so in '88, that's when Chad Smith and John Frusciante joined the band. Their album, the 4th album that came after that in 1989, called Mother's Milk, was certified gold. So that was the first album that kind of got noticed. Nothing big on that album though to talk about. But then they got actually got a better label deal after that, and they got Rick Rubin to produce their albums, and he produced a lot of their albums. And if you know, Rick Rubin is one of the big rock producers or whatever in the business. So they got a really good producer there. And their big album, first really big album, was Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic from 1991. And this sold 12 million, was a number 3 album in the charts. And they had 2 really huge hits on there. The first one was Give It Away, which I think a lot of people know them from that. Give it away, give it away, give it away now. It's like definitely has their sound, their kind of funky, like rock sound. And it was pretty big. It won a Grammy for Best Hard Rock Performance, that song. So they got a Grammy off of that. The other song, Under the Bridge, is one of their best songs. I absolutely love that song. Great intro. The guitar intro at the beginning is so good. But it's a softer song. It's definitely not hard rock like a lot of stuff. It's a little more softer rock. But really good stuff. Anthony Kiedis is such a unique kind of lead singer. A lot of people don't like him and think he's like one of the worst like lead singers, but he's definitely got a uniqueness to him. Because a lot of their songs, a lot of their rocker songs, early on at least, were very fast paced. He sang and he almost didn't really sing. He really almost sang. And I think a lot of people would say he's not a very good singer. And it's like, well, he wasn't a powerful singer necessarily, but it fit the group that he was in, the kind of style they were doing with the funk rock style anyways. And I think it works. And he's pretty good on stage. He's pretty active. But yeah. So John, the guitar player, actually quits the band at this point. And then they're trying to search for a new guitar player, and they really couldn't find a guitar player that really fit them. Guitar player named Dave Navarro joined them for like 1 album, which didn't really do much. But then in '98, like I said, the guitar player also had a really bad drug addiction. But he finally got sober enough that they got him to come back to the band. And then they came out with probably their biggest selling album, which is Californication in 1999. And I actually own this album. This is an album I actually bought. And it's because of one song, and that is Scar Tissue. Scar Tissue was a huge song on the radio, and I love that song. I love the guitar intro to that. And it's just a cool Scar Tissue, which you saw. It's just a cool sound. It's a little softer rock album or song. But and I love the guitar solo, and it is such a good song. It's probably my favorite song of theirs. But I bought this album because of that. And I was a big fan of this album. I think it's the only album I've ever owned from them, the only one I really know about. But really good album. I recommend this one. But it sold 16 million. It was a huge seller for them. I also had hit songs with Other Side and Californication, which is a super catchy song. I love that song as well. Again, I know Brian doesn't like it, but I'm like, man, Brian, they're talking about California. It should be a song or album you like, but I can't get anybody to really like this band.
I don't know. That song's more of a satire. That might not be why he likes the song. It's a satire of like the lavish, excessive lifestyles in California. So you might be offended by that song.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was a big album for them. And their sound kind of changed a little bit. They went less funky. They were doing a little more melodic type songs, more slower, more catchier songs, I think, at this point. So, which I think helped them. have more of a commercial feel. Starting with this album, Californication. The next album, 2002, By the Way, their 8th album, did well as well, and it had two big hit songs on it. By the Way, Can't Stop. Can't Stop was a pretty cool song. I like that song. And then maybe their kind of most well received album came out in 2006. Or the next album called Stadium Arcadium, and if anybody listens to music, you probably heard that album. Stadium Arcadium was pretty big for them. Not as big selling as Californication, but it sold 7 million. But it did win a Grammy for Best Rock Album, and Best Rock Performance. So it won them 2 Grammys. So that's why this album is definitely considered by critics like probably their best album. And it had Danny California and probably the most well-known song, Snow Hey Ho, which is a super catchy song that's been on the radio. Definitely check out that. That's a great song. And that went #1 in the charts. It's definitely one of their big hits. But besides that, I know they're still playing, and John I think he quit the band, and I don't know if he's still with the band or not, but yeah, in my opinion, like I know Sex Magic, whatever, I'm not a big fan of that album, but to me, like Californication, Stadium Arcadium, to me are the 2 albums you probably should check out from them. They had a recent album though, I heard it, their most recent album, I thought it was pretty good. I need to listen to it again, because I don't remember exactly all about it, but I kind of like their sound. I like their more melodic sound more than their, fast-paced funk rock. I'm not as big a fan, but the songs that they've been doing lately, I think, have been more of my taste. But overall, still, they're one of the biggest bands of the '90s. And what I've read is that they're one of the best-selling bands of all time. They hold records for most #1 singles, which 15 #1 singles, and most top 10 songs, 28 top 10 songs in the alternative songs chart. So amongst alternative bands, they're considered one of the greatest. So they had to go in the '90s for me. Even though people don't like them, they're still a huge hit, and I think they belong here.
Yeah, I've heard some of the Chili Pepper songs. Of the hit songs I've heard, I think I've liked a lot of the ones I've heard. So I don't know where a lot of the backlash is coming from. Like,
Yeah,
Bridge is a good song. The Other Side's a great song. Danny California is a really good song. I think my favorite song that I've heard from is probably Scar Tissue. That song is awesome.
that's such a good song.
Yeah. I don't know that Snow Ho Hey song or whatever that is. That's like, I think that was the #1 song. I'm like, I've not heard that one.
Yeah, listen to that one. That's a good song. It's catchy. I remember one time I was, sorry, I tell the story, but one time, this a couple of years ago, I was driving home from work and it was snowing, and this song came on the radio, and I thought, how ironic this song came on.
Yeah.
Song called Snow Hey Oh, and I'm like fighting the snow, like I can barely see outside. I'm like, oh man.
Well, the snow we just had in Tennessee, I turned on the radio and it was snow. There was snow all over the road.
Yeah.
And it was so cold outside. And the first song that played on the classic rock station was Cold as Ice by Foreigner.
You're cold.
That happened to me the other day.
Perfect song. Gosh, now Nick has joined us.
Oh. What's up, Nick?
Says, I'm sorry, Jason. I'm with Briar. Yeah, I know. You and Briar don't like him. I know. Which makes me slightly sad because I'd love to put one of their albums on their album exchange, but I know you guys would hate it. Like to me, Californication to me would be the album I would put on the album exchange.
Well, maybe give it a second chance, maybe. Like Radiohead, I don't know.
Radiohead, yeah. Yeah, you're not sure how you feel at night. I know you're going to struggle in the '90s, that's for sure, Nick. Then we got Scott back. I need to give Chili Peppers another try. I think so. Californication was a decent album, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's definitely, like I said, that one and Stadium Arcadium are the 2 I would recommend. But hey yo, listen to what I say. Yeah, that's the hey yo, listen what I say yo. That's kind of the chorus.
Yeah, I don't recognize that one.
Yeah. When I'm 25 minutes away from home, I put the Johnny Cash song on.
25 minutes ago. I know what you're talking about. Speaking of, I actually listened to the Folsom Prison album last night.
I
That is an amazing live album. It is so good.
Yeah, Nick's a big fan of that album. All right, so we got one more artist per person now.
All right, down to the last one.
Our last pick.
Well, I decided to save one of the biggest artists for last. Born in Huntington, New York, dubbed Songbird Supreme by Guinness World Records, and dubbed the fifth greatest singer of all time by Rolling Stone magazine in 2023. But I can take that with a grain of salt because
Yeah, I think
Stone. But still, Mariah Carey is who I'm talking about. Her debut album was in 1990 with her self-titled solo album. She is the only artist to have first 5 singles reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. What are her first 5 singles? I gotta look that up real quick. First 5 singles: Vision of Love, Love Takes Time, Someday, I Don't Want to Cry, and Emotions. I know like 3 of those songs, and they're great songs. Vision of Love is a beautiful ballad. I love that song.
Don't know if I know.
Emotions is a really good one as well. Has like a 70s disco feel to it. I love the chorus. You keep me in emotions. I'm not doing it justice because I can't sing like Mariah Carey. But Mariah Carey, she's best known for her 5-octave vocal range. Yeah, she can hit 5 octaves.
Crazy.
He is literally, I think if we're going by how vocally, she's probably one of the greatest singers out there because of how high of a register she can hit. She can do these whistle tones. Every time she hits these whistle tones, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like she's like, she is so good. It's rare to have somebody sing that talented, but Mariah Carey could pull that off. So with some really, really great songs. Trying to look at all some of the big songs she has. Hero is a great ballad she had in the 90s. She covered Without You, Harry Nilsson. That's a good song. She has my favorite Christmas album of all time with Merry Christmas from 1994. And she's even dubbed the Queen of Christmas, which I think some of that can get a little annoying. I'm not going to lie. She puts like the diva personality in that, and that can get on my nerves. I'm not real big on that style personality. But when you look at the album and you look at the songs, I can see why the songs did so well. You got like probably the best-selling Christmas song of all time with All I Want for Christmas Is You, which still goes to number 1 on the Hot 100 every Christmas season. I think it's been doing that since 2019. Yeah. It's just a great, catchy pop song with the Christmas spirit, and I think it's an awesome song. Man, she had a lot of big hits in the 90s. Fantasy is a great song. I already talked about this one with Boyz II Men, but One Sweet Day is a beautiful ballad that she did with Boyz II Men. Always Be My Baby is another song I really like from her. She hit another one I gotta mention. She did a really awesome duet with Whitney Houston on the Prince of Egypt soundtrack, When You Believe, which, if I remember correctly, I think won the Oscar for Best Original Song.
Yeah, beat out it.
Oh, what did it beat out?
I don't want to miss a thing.
Oh, it'd be that song. Wow. You think the Aerosmith song would have won that year, but well, both are great songs, so I'm good with either of those winning. But I'm surprised Aerosmith didn't win that year. She had a big bomb in the early 2000s. She did a movie called Glitter, and people thought that was like the end of her career because I've not seen the movie, but apparently it's terrible, and the soundtrack behind it's not that good, and the album tanked, and the movie tanked, and so people are like, "That's the end of Mariah Carey because this is a bad album and a bad movie." But she made a comeback in 2005. She put out an album called "The Emancipation of Mimi," and she had a #1 song called "We Belong Together," which is a really good song, really good R&B song that came out in the 2000s. And she still sing very well vocally on it.
Yeah,
Catchy little pop song there, and she still has some hit songs even into the 2000s. She had #1 in 2008 with "Touch My Body," and she's still putting out albums even into the 2010s. She had a second Christmas album, had a pretty good song on it called "Old Santa," which is a good earworm. And she's still, like I said, she's been putting out albums in more recent years. And I think more nowadays, she just markets herself as the Queen of Christmas. Like I said, like, to be honest, she doesn't have to put out a new album because she can make bank every year just from her Christmas albums. Particularly "All I Want for Christmas Is You." But it still stands. She still had a pretty good run with great songs, especially in the 90s. She had a lot of #1 hits. Let me look up. 200 million records sold worldwide. She holds the record for the most Hot 100 #1 singles by a solo artist, a female songwriter, and a female producer.
yeah.
A record 97 weeks atop the chart with all of these accolades.
Yeah.
And she's also the highest certified female artist in the United States. So she sold a lot of records, has a lot of #1 hits, and people may not like her diva personality, but they love her voice, and she has an incredible voice. Even now, she still sings pretty good. So Mariah Carey closes out my list of the 90s Hall of Fame.
All right. Good pick. One of the great female singers. One of the best high notes of all time.
Yeah, especially if you've heard the song "Emotions," like she can really belt it on that one.
I know that song. Maybe I do.
Yeah. There's a part at the end where she almost sounds like a bird, and it's like, and I can't do it justice because I'm not Mariah.
There's a song. Did you mention? I thought she did a song, or maybe she did a cover. I don't know. It was like the hero comes along.
Yeah, that's "Hero." And a
Hero
comes along in the strength to carry on. I love that song.
Yeah, that's one of her best songs. Yeah, definitely one of the greats. So yeah, Scott, in 30 minutes I got another live stream I'm gonna do with Nick and Briar, so I don't have time. I don't know if I have time to eat. I was hoping I'd get to eat something. We'll see. Because we're doing our top 10 albums of 1966.
Yeah, and I'm doing. I gotta do some schoolwork after this. So,
but we're going from one of the great female singers of the 90s to another great female singer of the 90s. My last pick is Celine Dion.
All right,
another Canadian singer from Quebec. She's a French Canadian. Unfortunately, I didn't get to write notes about her because I was trying to write notes about everything, but then I had something go on and I went around to write my notes for Celine Dion. So I try to go off of what I know about Celine Dion. But what can you say? One of the greatest voices of all time. Oh my gosh. To me, when I think of the great singers of the 90s, I think I put Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, I put Whitney Houston on there. Whitney Houston we talked about in the 80s, so she wasn't talked about in the 90s, but we did talk about Whitney. I think I was the one who talked about Whitney Houston in the 80s as well. So maybe there's other singers, but to me, on top of my mind, I think of the three singers as being some of the best female singers of the 90s period. Celine Dion, I've always been a big fan of her voice. She actually started out, I think she started out speaking French, actually. Like I said, her parents are both French or something. And she sang at like age 12. She was like the youngest of 14 kids. and she started singing at a pretty young age, but she was singing just French, I think, at first. Again, I wish I had my notes. I could talk more about when she came to America, but at some point she came to America and started singing in English, and her songs started. Even I've heard some of her albums, and she does have some songs that are in different language or French or something, which is a little like what, like I don't understand. Um, but yeah, I want to say like her first big song was uh, I can't remember. I didn't have it written
I
down.
think the earliest one that I know of, she did the pop version of Beauty and the Beast in '91. I don't know if that's the one you were thinking of.
Uh, her song, uh, called,
Power of Love, maybe.
You're my man,
Oh yeah, that's the Power of Love.
Power of Love. And maybe that one. I'm trying to think. I might be wrong. It's like that was one of her early hits. Probably my favorite song of hers is the "All by Myself." I think is it all by.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah, she did a cover of that one. Yeah.
and she hits the most incredible note I've ever heard in my life. I listen to that and get goosebumps when she hits that anymore. Then she hits this high note, and you're like, holy cow! It's one of the greatest notes of all that. She hits some of the greatest high notes I've ever heard in my life, where she will ramp it up and then she'll hit you with this incredible high note that you're like, oh my gosh! It's like I've never heard anybody sing like her. She's just, to me, in my opinion, the greatest female singer of all time. I think Celine Dion. She's just no other. I mean, like I said, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey can sing very well too and hit high notes, but Celine Dion has like some kind of power behind her voice that's just unprecedented in my opinion. Um, I do have this album. I can say this is my favorite Christmas album of all time. And These Are Special Times. Absolutely incredible Christmas album. Her Oh Holy Night is one of the greatest Christmas songs of all time. Her version is amazing when she hits that at the very end. Um, she hits that Oh Holy Night at the end, whatever and I'm forgetting what, but yeah, it's incredible. You have to listen to it. But yeah, it's a great album. Uh, but yeah, definitely check out that album. I do know she had an album in the '90s, around '97, I want to say. I think it was called "In Pieces" or "Into Pieces" or something like that, and it won the album. It won Grammy Album of the Year, so that was like probably her biggest album, and had a couple big hits on it. My favorite, the song "Will You Touch Me Like This and You Hold Me Like That."
Yeah, I know that song.
Coming back to me now. Oh my gosh, epic! It's a long, epic song, but it's amazing. And I remember hearing it on the radio back in that time period, and just like, oh my gosh, this song is so good. In fact, a little tidbit: uh, my first girlfriend I had when I was 13, I kissed her to this song. So that's why I always love that song because I had my first kiss, and I remember that song, and it's kind of I don't know if it's romantic. It's kind of romantic because she's talking about like an old love or something. Anyways, but yeah, love that. That's the way it is. I think it was on that song, that album as well. That's a great song. But anyways, maybe something around there. Anyways, but also you can't talk about her without mentioning. Yes, it was a Jim Steinman song. Who did Meatloaf? He did a
Oh,
lot for.
nice.
Yeah, because the piano on that song is so good.
I
It
mean,
does.
you you bringing that up, Keith. It does feel like a song Meatloaf could have
Yes,
sang.
it does. Very dramatic, very epic. Yeah. Kind of thing. But yeah, but you have to mention the Titanic song. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah,
the biggest song of all time. Um, now I'm trying to think of what is it called.
the
Uh,
heart will go on.
My heart will go. My heart will go on. Yeah, that song. Oh my gosh, that was on the radio like every day. I think I heard that on the radio when that came out. It's like you could not turn on the radio without that song coming on. I mean, it was huge. I think people got sick and tired of it because it was played on too much. But it went up winning won the Oscar for best song very deservingly. It's a great song. off of a huge movie, Titanic. And that's probably the most signature song maybe she's ever done, is that song. But in fact, in my eighth grade, we sang that song in the eighth grade choir. I remember we sang that at our eighth grade graduation. Whatever we sang, "My Heart Will Go On," I guess because it was the big song at the time. But then she still did some good stuff. "Taking Chances" is a great song. That one of my favorite of hers that came after that. And so she still, I know, made some albums. I can't say I'm a huge fan of their albums because she does have a lot of these other type of songs that I don't care for. But when she has those big hit songs that are like with huge note numbers, like I love them. She has tons of hit songs. I love listening to Celine Dion. Like she's definitely one of those singers. I make a playlist and listen over and over. I don't know if I have any. I don't think I have any of her albums. I'm thinking, but "In Pieces" would be probably the album to buy. I think it's the name of it because, like I said, it was album of the year and had some big songs on it. Besides that, I don't know as much more to say. She had a huge Las Vegas show, one of the biggest Las Vegas shows for a while, and unfortunately, she has some kind of disease, I think, and she can't sing anymore. So I think she's quit singing now.
She did recently sing at the 2024 Olympics, and that was seen as like her big singing comeback.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising because I remember she came out and said she had some issue where she couldn't sing or something. I thought she was going to quit singing, and then she showed up at the Olympics and sang at the end. So, which was really cool to see.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We might not see Celine Dion anymore, which is sad, but definitely, I think anybody listening definitely got to check out her music.
She definitely does have a good voice. She even contributed to a song in Deadpool 2 of all movies with Asher. That's a great song.
That's a good song too. Should have been Oscar nominated. That was so good. But
yeah, maybe Oscar couldn't take it seriously because it was in Deadpool 2.
I know, probably not. Who knows? Yeah, it's all coming back to me now. Great song. It's all coming back to me now. Yeah, thanks, Keith. I know Keith just showed up at the very end. Yes, I'll be doing an album here or live stream pretty soon here about 1966. Spexy Revolver, yeah. Revolver will be in.
Revolver's a great album.
Yeah. Okay, I think I got it all. Well, that is our part 2 and last part of our 1990s Music Hall of Fame. Thanks to Adam and Breyer for also contributing, and Jacob Martin here contributing to our 90s. I think we've picked out some really good groups to listen to if you haven't listened to them. Definitely are good. I think anybody that's watching, definitely check these people out, I think, and check some of their albums out. All got good stuff. This is probably the last we'll do of these. We've done Music Hall of Fame for the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So this kind of closes out probably our Music Hall of Fame. But we've done 40 artists per year. So, I mean, we've covered a lot of artists. What, 160? I don't know how. Am I doing the math right? Like 160 artists, 4 decades. So yeah. So definitely check those out. Hopefully I put it on a playlist. I definitely will put it on a playlist. So if anybody wanted to watch back at our other videos, definitely check those out because we put a lot of work into, I think, talking about these artists anyway. So it's been a blast. Thank you, Jacob, for coming on.
And yeah. Thank you for having me. I think it all started when Nick said he didn't know that many 80s or 90s artists. So I'm like, well, I can fill in that void.
So Jacob filled in. Yeah, you weren't on our 60s and 70s, so you filled in on 90s.
Yeah, I would have added more country artists along with the other artists that you guys chose.
Actually, I think we did 50 because I think I had Scott on for the 60s and 70s. So
yeah, Scott was on those two.
That's right. So
he was going to be on the 80s, but he dropped. So I added his.
That's right. So we did like 50 per decade, except for this decade we only did 40. So
yeah.
So we covered a lot of artists, which I think is very cool. That's why I wanted to do it. I want to talk about all the great artists that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like because Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is kind of stupid who they pick for their Hall of Fame.
They've had some weird decisions in the
Yeah.
last several years.
Yeah, and people like the Monkees aren't in, which is so stupid. But yeah,
They do have some glaring snubs. That's for sure.
really
Like
bad stuff.
like the Monkees for sure.
Yeah, the Monkees for sure. And a lot of other ones. So we covered all the.
I don't think's in there either.
Who's that?
Jim Croce.
Really? Oh my god.
I don't think he's in there either.
That's stupid. But yeah, so definitely wanted to correct this mistake. So that's why I put this together, because I wanted to correct the mistakes that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame did, and not only put the ones that they have in, but also highlight artists that they haven't done, that I think deserve to be in there. So it has been a fun blast doing this with everybody. But yeah, I need to go because I got another live stream starting in 20 minutes or so. So check that out here on my channel, Top 10 Albums of 1966. But besides that, thank you, Jacob, and guess we'll close out there. And thanks for everybody watching, and we'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.